One moment while we're just waiting for an officer. Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm afraid we are a few minutes late due to the number of people interested in the items for this evening. Welcome to this Area 2 Planning Committee. For the benefit of those watching on our YouTube channel, members of the committee are present in the chamber, and these members will be voting on proposals this evening. The meeting will also be recorded via MS Teams in case there are any technical issues. Other members of the council are also in attendance and are participating via MS Teams and can take part in any discussions, ask questions, but cannot vote. Your attention is drawn to agenda item 1, which sets out the guidance on how meetings will be conducted, including the ground rules. Could I say to anybody who's in our overflow room, please make attention for what I am saying in the next few minutes. Your attention is drawn to the rules for public speaking in respect of planning applications and committee procedure rules in the council's constitution, which apply to this planning committee meeting. I note that there has been a lot of public interest in 2 of the items on the agenda tonight. So for me to be able to effectively manage the meeting, I would appreciate it if members of the public and councillors speaking tonight only deal with the planning applications before us tonight and do not stray onto other matters. Please be advised that this is a meeting held in public. It is not a public meeting or rally. Members of the public are very welcome to join us to observe the formal meeting, but should not be disruptive. I do not wish to hear any applause or any other noises of support or derision for any speakers, be they public or committee members. As a member of the public, if you feel you will not be able to contain yourself, there is room in the committee room at the other side of the entrance where officers have set up the screen where you can view proceedings. When invited to speak, speakers must come forward to the microphone in front of the committee and not speak from the public area. When speaking, comments should be confined to planning matters only. I will reserve the right to stop the speaker if I consider them not to be appropriate. Okay, we'll now take a roll call, Victoria, if we may.
Thank you. Councillor Palmer.
Present.
Apologies been received from Councillor Brown. Councillor Banks.
Present.
Councillor Betts.
Present.
Councillor Borton.
I'm here.
Apologies been received from Councillor Boxall. Apologies been received from Councillor Coffin, who's participating via MS Teams. Councillor Crisp.
Here.
Apologies been received from Councillor Dean. Councillor Harman. Councillor Hudson.
Present.
Apologies been received from Councillor Lark. Councillor Roud. Councillor Tanner.
Present.
Councillor Tatton.
Present.
And Councillor Taylor.
Present.
Thank you.
If we'd like to have officers now introduce themselves, we'd like to start Mr. Bailey.
Good evening, members. James Bailey, Head of Planning.
Susan Field, Principal Planning Officer.
Joy Ukadike, Head of Legal and Democratic Services and Legal Officer for tonight.
Victoria Freeman, Democratic Services Officer.
Okay, so we've done apologies, declarations of interest for anybody this evening? No. Minutes of the last meeting, minutes for the meeting held on January 14th. May I sign those minutes? In fact, I can't because I didn't chair it. So I can't sign it because I didn't chair it. Oh. My voice sounds awful. Right, okay. We are moving on to our first, no, not. Are we okay? I've just been told that the quality of sound in the committee room is not brilliant. I'm afraid, at the moment, we do not have any technicians who are available to correct that. So hopefully it will get better. Thank you. Our first application this evening is, yep, ready? Land north of Drayhorse Meadow, Fields Lane, Wateringbury. Suzanne will be giving us the presentation before we have our speakers.
Thank you, Chair. Planning permission is sought for the development of the site to provide 66 dwellings together with associated access, parking, open space and landscaping. The first slide shows the site. The development would deliver a mix of 2-storey dwellings comprising 6 1-bed, 24 2-bed, 24 3-bed and 11 4-beds, 50% of which would be affordable and policy compliant in relation to the split. A new vehicular access is proposed onto Tonbridge Road, along with a secondary pedestrian and emergency access also located on Tonbridge Road further to the east. The proposal also includes a pedestrian link into the playing fields to the south. The built form is proposed to be located on the western half of the site, with the eastern half proposed as landscaping and wildlife. And I just have a couple of photographs. This photograph is a view from Tonbridge Road. You can see from the arrow where it's been taken. The next photo is a view from Fields Lane. And then the final photo is from the site from Fields Lane. This photo is from the landscape and visual appraisal prepared in support of the emerging local plan, and it's taken from the public right-of-way near Hunt Street. And you can see the arrows there annotate where the site is. And my final photo is taken from the applicant's landscape visual appraisal. I'll put this one because it is a little bit clearer. And just of note, just to remind you that the built form is proposed on the eastern half of the site, and the proposal includes a landscaping scheme which will strengthen tree planting along the southern boundary, which would reduce the visual impact of the proposed development and filter views into the site. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We are going to now have our speakers. Can I remind speakers that your face and voice may appear on the live stream and the archived recording of the meeting, and your names were recorded in the minutes. So our first speaker is the Parish Councillor of Wateringbury, Mr. Ken Hutchison.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm representing Wateringbury Parish Council, and we formally object to the application for the following reasons. Number one, the misapplication of the Green Belt and Grey Belt policy. The site is acknowledged as inappropriate Green Belt development. Reclassification as Grey Belt relies on selective interpretation of emerging evidence, ignoring strong contribution to preventing countryside encroachment, and conflicts with NPPF requirements to access Green Belt purposes collectively rather than selectively, as in this case. 2. Unjustified harm to the Green Belt openness. The proposal causes loss of openness and rural character that cannot be mitigated by landscaping. The site currently forms an important transition between Wateringbury and open countryside. 3. The land in question has had planning permission previously refused, and TMBC's previous local plans have discounted this site as not suitable for development. 4. Landscape and visual harm is underplayed. The applicant's own landscape and visual appraisal identifies major adverse effects on public rights of way, roads and long distance views across the Medway Valley, which the report downplays despite the area's recognised sensitivity. 5. Highways congestion and air quality impacts are uncertain. Traffic and air quality modelling is based on favourable assumptions, incomplete data and limited transparency. Impacts on the Waterbury AQMA and cumulative congestion are not robustly assessed, contrary to national and local policy. In such areas of uncertainty, policy requires a precautionary approach, particularly where a development may worsen existing exceedances. 6. Inadequate mitigation of transport impacts. The proposed junction mitigation and financial contributions are modest and unlikely to resolve existing severe congestion at Waterbury Crossroads. 7. Loss of best and most valuable versatile agricultural land. The site comprises of Grade 1 and Grade 2 agricultural land. National policy does not support dismissing this loss as minor, as the report does, due to site size or the current grazing use. 8. Sustainability of location is overstated. The site has limited access to services and would increase reliance on private car use. Proximity to a railway station alone does not constitute sustainable development. Finally, point 9. Planning balance has not been met. When assessed holistically, the environmental and infrastructure harms, particularly to greenbelt openness, landscape character, traffic and air quality, clearly outweigh the limited benefits. Our overall conclusion: TMBC have previously discounted this site not suitable for development. We feel if a full local plan with a 5-year allocation were in place, this land would not be included, and therefore the application would be rejected. The proposal represents unjustified development on sensitive greenbelt land. The reliance on grey belt arguments is flawed, mitigation is uncertain, as is traffic and air quality, and therefore the planning permission should be refused. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Julie Northern.
Good evening, Chairman and members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I am objecting to the proposed development in the Medway Valley, not because I oppose housing in principle, but because this scheme sits within an AQMA. It is not sustainable, and the devastating effect this would have on our village from losing the views across the Medway Valley. This development has been presented as sustainable, yet it lacks meaningful environmental commitment due to the following. There is no clear provision for solar panels, no supermarket, secondary school and mainline station in the village. From my experience and everyone I know that lives in the village, you need access to a vehicle. In the Brucks, there are 34 houses, 95 bedrooms. Over the last 6 working days, between 16 and 19 cars have been parked on the road at 7:30 each morning. This is despite residents already extending their driveways. That suggests in proposed build, 28 to 34 extra spaces are required. This development proposes only 14 guest spaces. This does not account for weekend visits from family and friends when the planning report vehicles This does not account for weekend visits from family and friends, also from football matches and school runs. This means that Fields Lane, Cobbs Close and the Brucks will be under further strain, and this is not sustainable. Waterbury has been designated an AQMA for 21 years. Pollution levels are a long-standing concern. Tunbridge and Morning Borough Council policy SQ4 MPE DPD states that developments must not worsen air quality and must include migration measures where necessary. The planning officer's report mentions setting back houses by 20 metres and installing an MOVA system. While MVOA is designed to optimise traffic, it can cause increased traffic volumes and faster moving traffic, putting pedestrians at risk. Levels of pollution change with weather conditions and seasons. I urge members to reject this application until a non-conflicting study has been carried out over a substantial period of time with the MVOA in place. The field in question is full of biodiversity living within the soil, which is a major part of our ecosystem. This land is also classed as Grade 1 agricultural, which should be protected. This land gives access to stunning views across the Medway Valley and is part of our village's identity. Where is the evidence that brownfields have been sought as an alternative to fulfil the local housing quota? On the Tunbridge Moorland website, it says the brownfield site registry is being updated, so therefore unavailable. We have concerns about the actual housing needs in Tunbridge and Moorland. Many thanks for listening to my concerns.
I now have the name of John Tilthorpe, but I understand that he is not well and somebody else is going to speak on his behalf. Mr. Cooling.
Thank you very much. Yes, this is on behalf of John Tilthorpe, who is a Waterbury resident in the Orpines. As a resident of Waterbury, I accept in principle the concept and aim behind this project, but feel the opportunity to hopefully better serve the needs and wishes of all concerned is at present lost, in particular for those over the years who have chosen to settle, bring up a family and retire, who view this proposal to be a step too far. The existing plan is not suitable given its overall size, house split and density to the east, adding to already the largest residential concentration, not to mention its appearance and construction when compared to the surrounding open fields indicating perhaps greenbelt status. In addition, one should not overlook the change in use, grazing land, and introduction of a further 66 houses to the mix with another 21 possible across the road, which will certainly not help current major problems associated with access and traffic conditions on the Tunbridge Road and the Waterbury Crossroads, itself the most air polluted in the whole of Tunbridge and Moorland Borough. Similarly, given the relative size and nature of this project, questions must surely be asked as to the adequacy of existing infrastructure and services, including sewage with all that entails. Possible added flood risk with less runoff cannot likewise be sidelined. One should not forget, if matters proceed as planned, the loss of privacy, views, and the general feeling of open space currently enjoyed by the nearby properties, not to mention the obvious inconveniences and reductions in the quality of life resulting. As to the village with its aging population, I have deep concerns that if allowed in its present form, dangerous precedent will be set for future builds, adversely affecting the character, makeup, and progression of this piece of green and pleasant land, typical of the surroundings of a river valley, in particular the area concerned here with its outstanding views. In any event, there is strong evidence of no shortage of land for developments of this kind within a short distance of Waterbury, which would be a better fix with its setting and create less problems as far as infrastructure, environment, inconvenience, spread, and infill. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next on my list to speak is Elisa. Is it Elisa Peacock or Elisa?
Good evening, Chair and members. Thank you for listening to my objection. While I have concerns regarding air pollution, public health, traffic and parking impacts, my principal objection relates to the irreversible harm this proposal would cause to the landscape character, the historic setting and valued views of the Medway Valley. This site is Grade 1 agricultural land that has been pasture for around 40 years with minimal human interference. As a result, the soil supports high biodiversity. Building on this land would permanently destroy this habitat. This land provides unrivaled views of the valley and forms an essential part of Waterbury's connection to its surrounding landscape. It offers the only view of the Medway Valley from the A26 within the village. Once lost, this view cannot be recreated. Planning report, paragraph 6.75, suggests that vegetation currently limits views in places. However, vegetation can be managed. 66 houses cannot. No matter how carefully designed, no layout or landscaping scheme can replace the loss of open countryside. Paragraph 6.88 of the report claims that housing designed to suit the village and supported by strategic landscaping would lessen the impact and mitigate the loss of the valley view. I strongly disagree. Again, no design layout or landscaping scheme can replace or restore the view that would be lost. The impact on Waterbury would be permanent and irreversible. Paragraph 187 of the National Planning Policy Framework states that development should conserve and enhance the natural environment and respect local character. Developing this site would weaken Waterbury's natural environment, its historic identity, local character and sense of place. Development would sever Waterbury from the Medway Valley, which is our village's very identity. I would also respectfully ask councillors to also consider the nearly 900 rental properties that currently sit empty in Tunbridge and Malling. A friend of mine in Ditton has a council property next to her that has now been empty for 18 months. Why build houses and carve up the countryside when we are not utilising the properties we already have? For me, it calls into question the current housing need in our borough. Although the law has changed, turning greenbelt to potential greybelt, the first golden rule set out in the revised NPPF states we prioritise the development of brownfield sites. As of late 2025, TNBC has been updating its brownfield register and conducting a call for sites. I ask that maybe we refuse this application or at least defer it until all of the potential brownfield sites in the borough have been explored and the brownfield register has been updated accordingly. Otherwise, this development may breach that golden rule and the extremely precious piece of land will be lost forever.
Thank you. My next speaker is John Etheridge.
Thank you for the opportunity to say a few words on this matter. My wife and I have lived in Waterbury for over 20 years. We understand the pressure that councils nationwide are under to provide more homes. It should also be said that councils have a duty of care to their residents and their communities. So when in November, I read this council's land availability assessment, specifically in regard to this development, I was heartened by the conclusion, and it seems worth repeating, and I quote, "The site is located to the south of Tunbridge Road and east of Fields Lane. It is undeveloped agricultural fields. It is located adjacent to the settlement boundary of Waterbury within the Green Belt. However, the Stage 2 Green Belt assessment considered that the site performs strongly against the National Planning Policy Framework purposes and makes an important contribution to the wider Green Belt. The site is also Grade 1 agricultural land, best and most versatile. The development of this site will result in an increase in traffic in the nearby air quality management area. Due to the high sensitivity of the site to the purposes of the Green Belt and its designation as Grade 1 agricultural land, and also the likely worsening of air quality in the nearby AQMA, it is considered that the site would be unsuitable for development." End of quote. So, the increase in traffic and likely worsening of air quality. I would estimate that 66 houses would add nearly 200 extra vehicles, including goods and service vehicles, all using roads which are in part crumbling literally under current traffic levels. As for air quality, I have it on good authority that the workmen who last year renovated our village lockup by the car park had to be issued with masks and respirators. They said it was the worst polluted environment they had ever endured. I believe, in fact I know, that this proposed development would deprive villagers, present and future, of the last remaining view of this section of the beautiful Medway Valley. It is a genuine, never to be regained village amenity. So for all the above reasons, and many more I don't have time for tonight, I urge you to reject this development proposal. Politics matter, of course they do, but so do the lives of ordinary people. Thank you for your time.
Now I have Mr. Peter Cooling in his own right.
I'm here as an individual, not allowed to speak as chairman, Teeston Parish Council. Waterbury, West Farley and Nettlestead Parish Councils have also raised objections so a full house objection from affected parish councils. Given the volume of papers you receive, you may not have had time to read the weekend email from Teessing Parish Council. In essence, it covers the following. The October 25 Tunbridge and Malling Landscape Character Assessment states in its development management guidelines protect the settings of Waterbury. This application does not. Officers make clear that, judged by Greenbelt criteria, this application should be refused. It therefore fundamentally depends upon grey belt classification. In September 25, OVARAP partners produced 2 reports, Stage 1 and Stage 2 Greenbelt assessments. Stage 1 was broad brush, Stage 2 dived deeper and identified 136 areas for consideration as T&M grey belt. 62 were not recommended, 4 were partially recommended, and 70 were recommended for further consideration as grey belt candidates. The application site is in one of those 136 areas, but was one of the 62 not recommended for further consideration as grey belt candidates, while the other 2 Waterbury sites were. The officer's report is somewhat selective in quoting ARAP's findings. The ARAP report includes 9 maps, each showing and assessing all 3 Waterbury sites. In paragraph 622, the officer's report quotes ARAP's assessments, and if those scores are accepted, they lead to the conclusion that it is grey belt. Except that the final map is ignored. That final concluding map explicitly states that the area containing the application site is not one of those to be taken forward as grey belt, or as the other 2 Waterbury areas are. To strengthen that conclusion, even if it were grey belt, NPPF paragraph 155 rules out the site because development would undermine the purposes of the rest of the green belt, taking Waterbury as a substantial settlement. Considering the site as grey belt does not withstand thorough scrutiny. ARAP rules it out. Should the applicant appeal a refusal, your refusal, the inspector will consider ARAP's full assessment. Should that appeal succeed, history has demonstrated that costs against T&M would be very low or even nil, especially after assurance from officers that the recent exceptional incident of 300k costs would not reoccur, as procedures have been tightened to avoid a repeat officer error. Please refuse this application. It is not grey belt. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker actually cannot attend, but has sent a statement which Victoria is going to read to us. This is from David Mitchell-Moore.
Landscape harm lies at the heart of my opposition to the Fields Lane development. The landscape of local value policy that Maidstone Borough Council have in place accurately assesses the value and amenity the Medway Valley offers to walkers, residents and motorists on a daily basis. The landscape character assessment concludes that the valley must be conserved given its quality and the sensitivity of natural forms. Should this application be successful, it will blight the use and appreciation of the surrounding area irreparably. The developer's landscape and visual impact assessment dismisses the magnitude of visual change should the application be successful as negligible. However, many key viewpoints are highly susceptible to change given their clear visibility from the site. To conclude, should this application be successful, it will rob residents and visitors alike of a sustained unimpeded view of the Medway Valley view other section of the river provide. If UNESCO considered local or regional sites for heritage status, then our Medway Valley would be a very strong contender. Please oppose this application.
Thank you. And our last speaker is our representative from an agent.
Thank you. To begin, my name is Holly Beckett. I'm a land manager at Crowdace Homes, a part owner of the site and the company that will deliver the development should planning permission be granted. Crowdace Homes is a medium-sized, family-owned house builder established in 1946 to help rebuild homes across the country following the Second World War. We take pride in delivering high-quality, sustainable housing, as demonstrated by our work at Hermitage Park in Maidstone. We have held 5-star customer satisfaction rating from the Homes Building Federation for 13 consecutive years, which means that more than 90% of our customers, when independently surveyed, said they would recommend a Crowd-Ace home to others. As members will be aware, Tonbridge and Malling currently have a 2.89-year housing land supply, significantly below the required 5-year level. High-quality developments, such as the one that we're proposing at Waterbury, are therefore needed to help address this shortfall. The site forms a logical extension to Wateringbury, adjoining the existing settlement in a sustainable location within walking distance of the station and local amenities. The proposed layout is landscape-led, with 44% of the site built upon. That remains 56% of the site will remain free, and it will be protected from development in perpetuity to provide open space. This will include informal and formal play areas and a community orchard. The scheme will also deliver 22% biodiversity net gain, exceeding the 10% requirement, and 50% of the homes will be affordable, comprising both affordable rent and shared ownership. We have expressions of interest from 2 registered providers who would take forward the long-term management of the affordable homes, highlighting the strong demand and need for such affordable homes in the area. We have worked carefully to refine the proposals from our initial concepts, going above and beyond policy requirements to prioritise quality, design and community benefit. In addition, through a Section 106 agreement, we will contribute to local infrastructure, including a significant contribution beyond our proportional impact towards installing micropressor optimised vehicle accurization at the Wateringbury crossroads. This system will optimise traffic flows in real time, reducing the delay and improving capacity at a junction that many residents use daily. As set out in your officer's report, the site is classified as grey belt, with all of the relevant criteria set out within the NPPF being met, meaning that development is appropriate in principle. Furthermore, none of the statutory constituencies object to the proposal. This is a deliverable scheme supported by technical consultees, capable of early implementation and able to provide a substantial amount of affordable housing at a time of acute need. Officers conclude that the site's grey belt status and the absence of harmful impacts means that there is no strong basis for refusal and that the benefits of the proposals clearly and demonstrably outweigh any harms. They therefore recommend approval. In summary, this is a high-quality landscape-led development.
Okay, right, that's the end of our speakers. Before we start our debate, can I draw members' attentions to the supplementary that was sent out this afternoon? I hope you've all seen it. Yeah. Okay, to take into consideration. I'm going to call on Councillor Borton first, as he's the person who called it in.
Thank you ever so much, Chair. There is quite a lot to discuss here. We've had lots of points brought up during the course of the public speakers, and members of this committee have received lots of correspondence over the last few days, to which I thank everyone who has written to us. I'm going to limit my comments in the interest of time as best I can, but given the amount of issues to discuss, that might take still a little bit of time. The history of the site is really important, particularly for members of this committee who don't know Wateringbury as well as obviously Sarah and I, being the 2 local borough councillors. So there's been developer sort of option on this site since 1999, and it hasn't come forward until now. And when we met with the developer, or the developer invited Sarah and I to a meeting before planning application had been submitted about a year or so ago, we were essentially told that the reason that this application they were going to put it in was because of the housing need. Now, we pressed back very strongly and suggested that actually we live in a plan-led system of local planning, and that what we would very much encourage all developers to do would be to essentially get an allocation in the local plan and then put forward a planning application. That is the right and proper thing to do. But this developer has chosen not to do that, and as some of the speakers have referenced, this site was not included in the sites at Regulation 18 consultation that took place at the end of last year. So therefore, this is very much a speculative application, And as Ken Hutchinson from Waterbury Parish Council said, he made lots and lots of excellent points, but one of the key points was, if we were advanced in our local plan, more advanced than we are, and we had a 5-year housing land supply, this site would not be put forward. And that's the truth of the matter. This is a pure speculative planning application and needs to be treated as such. Now, one of my gripes with the applicant on this is that the way that this has been approached. So there has been pre-applications submitted to this council in 2016 and 2022. One of them, I at one point put forward a new community centre. Now, anyone who's been to Waterbury Village Hall knows that it is one of probably, and I've been to probably most village halls in the borough, I'd argue it's one of the best village halls in the borough. It's really well used and it's 50 yards away from this site. So the applicants were offering community benefits that the community already had in spades. The other thing which I think has caused a lot of resentment in the village, and something that I feel very strongly about, is the way the developer has approached this application. Because what happened was, shortly after their meeting, they put round a leaflet to the village which said it was a community consultation, as they called it. Well, it wasn't a consultation in the slightest. It was a complete sham, it was. And the reason it was a sham was because when we spoke to the developers subsequent to that, I asked for details on what the residents had said. And they informed us that there were 121 responses from the village to it. They were practically all objections, 71 raised highways issues, 66 infrastructure issues, and 39 were upset about the principle of development as the highlights. So I then said in the meeting, I'm sure Sarah can back me up on this, I said, okay, if your interest is the village of Waterbury, are you going to do anything? Are you going to make any changes to that? And we got told two things. One, we will put in a detailed planning application rather than an outline planning application. And two, we will do a transport assessment. Well, what planning application wasn't a subject of concern to the residents who responded? And the second thing, you'd have to do a transport assessment anyway. So it was just all, it was a complete waste of time. It was, and this is where the development industry goes wrong. You do consultations and then don't listen to feedback. And then no wonder we're in a situation in which the public gallery is full here tonight. The overflow room is full here tonight. We've got scores of viewers on YouTube. You've got protest groups set up. The development industry sometimes does not help itself, and it has not helped itself with its way it has progressed this application. Now, moving on, I'm going to focus on a few issues. So I'm going to park, I know Sarah wants to talk about the green belt, grey belt issue, so I'll park that for the minute. I might come back later in the debate. Issues around housing targets have been well rehearsed before, but we're not going to solve that in this chamber. Well, probably never, but we're certainly not going to solve that today, as high as they are and as ridiculous as they are. We've got the usual Kent highways, no objections. So I'm going to focus on three particular issues. The first is around, well, two main ones actually, in the interest of time. The first is around air quality. As some of the speakers said, this is the most polluted part of Tunbridge and Moorland, period, fact. It is, all the reports that we get from environmental health state that the pollution at the Waterbury crossroads is higher than it is anywhere else in the borough. We all know that there are other areas in the borough in which there has been significant amounts of pollution. At 6.153 of the report, this is mentioned in some detail in respect of the recent appeal decision that we had at Ivy Farm in East Malling. But the critical thing here is that this planning application is on the east of the crossroads, 50 yards away from the crossroads themselves, and that the arm of this particular arm of the crossroads has got significant delays in, much more than the traffic coming down Red Hill, which is the northern arm of the crossroads. And obviously the site at Ivy Farm is a significant distance to the north in East Malling. Traffic will exit via Teeston or via Sweets Lane potentially, or obviously into East Malling itself. So I don't think they're really comparable, the Ivy Farm application and this application, particularly in terms of air quality. It is undeniable to me that this is going to have a greater impact than the Ivy Farm application on the Waterbury crossroads. And the history of the Waterbury crossroads is very, very important for this, because most communities are crying out for road improvements. Now, the problem we've got in Waterbury is every single bit of traffic has to go through the crossroads. And on the northwest corner, you've got the tea rooms. On the southwest corner, you've got the village hall. On the northeast corner, you've got derelict properties that are owned by an infamous landlord who's playing games as he usually does with that. And on the southeast corner, you have the air quality gardens. Now, the highway scheme to improve the air quality at the Waterbury crossroads essentially involves taking out the air quality gardens, which were installed 5 years ago by villagers to improve air quality at the Waterbury crossroads, and has the impact of putting more traffic through in the air quality area, which worsens the air quality. So you cannot do anything here. And 6 or 7 years ago, KCC were collecting money for a scheme at the Waterbury crossroads to effectively do this. And there were some Section 106 contributions and developments at Hermitage Lane that was being identified. And the residents of Waterbury made very clear at the time that they didn't want the Section 106 money. They didn't want the highway improvements because it would take out the air quality gardens and result in worsening air quality through Waterbury. So what Maidstone Borough Council did, quite rightly, was they actually put that money towards getting step-free access at Yolding Station. There was additional money that came from the Syngenta site at Yolding too. So obviously that went into the Yolding Station step-free access. And everyone was quite happy with that, to be honest. We didn't really want to have more vehicles going through the crossroads to worsen the air quality. Now, Waterbury Parish Council have done, sorry, my papers are all over the place, but Waterbury Parish Council commissioned a report to help with the determination of this application. And well, they did 2 reports. They did one on highways and one on the AQMA. And paragraph 5.14 of the Waterbury Parish Council report states the following. Given the site's proximity to Waterbury AQMA 4 and the expected influence of road traffic emissions, it is likely that P2.5 concentrations will remain above this target, resulting in continued exposure of future residents to levels inconsistent with the government's long-term air quality objectives. Now, I'm disappointed that that has not worked its way via the comments from the environmental health officers on this application into actually substantiating what I think would be a good reason for refusal, because it will result in more cars queuing and more cars idling. And therefore, there is an important assessment that needs to take place against paragraph 199 of the National Planning Policy Framework, and also policy SQ4 of the Managing Development and the Environment Development Plan document that this council's got, that the proposal will cause deterioration of the air quality in Waterbury. Now, linked to that, you also have a potential highway scheme, which isn't really a highway scheme, it's a traffic light scheme, to improve the phasing of the traffic lights at the Waterbury crossroads, which was briefly mentioned in the public speaking session. But the problem with this is that the contribution is 20,000 out of a project of £250,000. So it doesn't really go anywhere. I mean, I try to think how many houses you'd need to be built for that. My second point was actually stolen from me, but in a very good way, by Mr. Etheridge, which was the land availability assessment in relation to the local plan, in which it made clear that this site was excluded from consideration in the local plan because this is grade 1 agricultural land, best and most versatile, and the development of the site would result in an increase in traffic in the nearby AQMA, as I've just mentioned, and due to the high sensitivity of the site to the purpose of the green belt and the lighting in worse quality, the site would be considered unsuitable for development. So we have to appreciate that residents have just been told, well, hold on a second, our assessment has considered this site unworthy of development, and now we've got a recommendation to approve. Now, I know what Mr. Bailey and Ms. Field will say, and they're not wrong for saying this, I'm not going to criticise them for saying this, which is that the tests of development management are different to the tests of planning policy, but nonetheless, it is still important weight that has to be considered towards the determination of this planning application. And I'm sure we'll come on to discuss this further. My third point is in relation to landscaping, and this is where I'll finish, you'll all be pleased to know. At 6.64 of the report, So the Medway Valley is characterised by great views from one side to the other. Whether you're on the north, as Waterbury is, and Teeston and Barmin heading into Maidstone, or the south through East Farley and West Farley, the views are fantastic, and they are worth protecting. And Maidstone Borough Council have a policy in that they have, if I can get my paperwork in the correct place, I will tell you what the policy is. They have a landscape character assessment for the Middle Medway Valley. Now, what that does is essentially focus around the route of the upper River Medway, extending from Nettlestead to the outskirts of Maidstone and Tovell, so heading to the east outside of this borough, and noted that deep valley sides that the river has cut through these strata provide one of the most picturesque landscapes of the Medway, notably where it flows beneath the striking historic bridging points. It describes the landscape beyond the river channel changing due to reduction in fruit and hops that are grown with their distinctive high hedges or windbreaks, and due to the expansion of the suburbs of Maidstone, this has resulted in a reduction in enclosure and visual variety, opening out views to the suburbs. The condition of the landscape is assessed as poor and the sensitivity as high. Now, there was a recent appeal decision in Maidstone that's worth noting, because the problem that we've got is that most of this area, Nettlestead, West Farley, East Farley, Tovell, the suburbs of Maidstone, Barmin, Teeston are in Maidstone Borough. So essentially we're sort of considering the impact of something that's outside of this borough. But in 2024, there was an appeal decision for some glamping pods at St Helens Lane in West Farley that referenced the aforementioned study and indicated that the Medway Valley between Maidstone and Waterbury has high overall landscape sensitivity and is sensitive to change. Now, that has to be compared against the documents that were referred to and published as part of our local plan evidence base, which I've got here. So we've got the landscape and visual appraisal, we've got the landscape character assessment. But these documents, although they carry weight in development management terms, we are at a very early stage of our local plan. And just like we wouldn't use our local plan as a reason to refuse this site because we've only just finished the Regulation 18 consultation, in terms of the evidence base that's used for it, this hasn't been scrutinised as a document by the planning inspector, as you would consider would happen through the local plan process. So to my mind, the Maidstone obviously have got their local plan in place, and whatever you think of their local plan, they've got an adopted policy, and therefore I think that carries more weight than our own. Not because I think theirs is better than ours, but I mean, we can argue that all night if we want to, but actually I think that what it does here is to characterise the Medway Valley, the majority of which falls in Maidstone Borough. But we also have support for this through CP14 of our own Tunbridge and Morning Core strategy. We have paragraph 188 of National Planning Policy Framework that state that we should take a strategic approach to maintaining and enhancing networks of habitats and green infrastructure. You've also got paragraph 187 of the NPPF. And to me, the nature of this proposal, particularly by the layout of it, very tucked up against the west of the site, which is where the predominance of the residential development is in Waterbury, causes clear landscape harm, and by virtue of the impact that I have described to the Medway Valley between Maidstone and Waterbury. Chair, I'm going to stop there because there's lots more that we can discuss, but I'm particularly interested in landscape here because I think that we've got for Tunbridge and Morlin, a unique landscape. The borough boundary is not helpful in this regard, but nonetheless, landscape doesn't matter where the borough boundary is, it's a boundary on a map. We're going to have to assess it against what we know in planning terms about that landscape. And I really want to pursue the landscape points in particular during the debate, and I will probably speak later. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hudson.
Thank you, Chairman. Respectfully, I think officers have erred in their interpretation of grey belt policy. Officers have outlined their conclusions as to why they consider the site meets the definition of grey belt. However, once it's established that a site meets the definition, paragraph 155 of the NPPF sets out further tests. The first of these is that the development would not fundamentally undermine the purposes taken together of the remaining green belt across the area of the plan. This goes beyond a judgment relating to purposes A, B and D as outlined by officers at paragraph 6.29. Purposes C and E relating to the green belt are brought into play. The third purpose, purpose C, is to assist in safeguarding the countryside from encroachment. Officers confirm that the site scores the maximum score of 5, performing very strongly in this regard, making an important contribution to the wider green belt within the strategic green belt assessment, which is paragraph 6.19 of the officer report. In fact, it was the overwhelming reason as to why this site was discounted within the most recent call for sites and is not proposed to be allocated for housing in the draft local plan. The strategic green belt assessment deems that due to the high sensitivity of the site to the purposes of the green belt, alongside its designation as grade 1 agricultural land adjacent to the AQMA, it would be deemed unsuitable for development. The proposals would cover the vast majority of the site from a substantial housing development which would manifest encroachment into the countryside. In addition, purpose E, to assist in urban regeneration by encouraging the recycling of derelict and other urban land. The size of the housing development proposed is not substantial when considering the larger allocations made within the adopted and emerging local plan. As such, there are likely other previously developed sites across the borough which would be more suitable to accommodate 66 dwellings. As such, developing this largely greenfield site does not assist in encouraging the recycling of derelict or other urban land. Accordingly, the proposal would conflict with the purposes of including this land within the green belt when these purposes, all 5, not just the three referred to by officers at paragraph 6.27 to 6.29, are all taken together because of the significance of the encroachment here. There would be a fundamental undermining of the purposes of the remaining green belt across the plan area due to the strong contribution the site makes in safeguarding the countryside from encroachment and the significant and material encroachment proposed by the scheme. Although the land to be developed may be defined as grey belt, once making a conclusion on that definition, all 4 criteria within paragraph 155 must all be met for the development to be judged as not inappropriate. That is clear from the wording of the paragraph. This development fails to meet criterion A, so as a result, the development should be regarded as being inappropriate. There you go.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I first wanted to pick up on the point that Councillor Borton raised about air quality. And I think environmental health have done us a disservice here by just comparing this with Ivy Farm, and it's irrelevant. I come from Borough Green, which was contained one of the most polluted junctions in the borough. And we were an air quality management area. Now, right across the country, air quality management areas have been falling away because improvements in combustion engine technology, the rise of electric vehicles, despite the increase in traffic, has meant a fall in pollution, but not in Wateringbury. Why not in Wateringbury? And I think that is a point that environmental health need to pick up on. It is a serious public health issue. The other point I wanted to make, if this application does get approved, I'd like the developer to consider rotating the development by 90 degrees so that biodiversity net gain can be put on the southern side with significant planting of trees. We'll still lose the view from Tunbridge Road into the valley, but it will preserve the important views in the valley itself. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Betts.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to first just to address the grade 1 farming land category. Bearing in mind my farming background, naturally I'm going to be concentrating on the fact that using grade 1 categorised land is in my mind disastrous, and I'll tell you for why. The UK at present is only 66% self-sustainable in food production. So to take out grade 1 land, which is our best land for the purpose of development, naturally goes against my grain. That was the first thing. I just thought I'd bring that one up first of all. The area I really wanted to sort of concentrate on was what Councillor Borton brought up, and that was the AQMA. Now, with my cabinet member hat on, I'm responsible for environment. Well, not me personally, but that's my portfolio. And 5th of November, I've got the report in front of me now. 5th of November, Communities and Environment Scrutiny Select Committee reviewed AQMAs across the borough. Within that report, there are a number of revocations of AQMAs, and Councillor Taylor has just highlighted one of them, which was a major AQMA at Borough Green. But interestingly, the revocations were Tunbridge High Street. Now, you can imagine the traffic through Tunbridge High Street, but yet that was revocated. Larkfield, Elsford, and Borough Green. All those AQMAs went into revocation, apart from Waterbury. I go to 5.5 of that report, 5.51. Waterbury continues to be our only AQMA where diffusion tube monitoring remains. 5.52. Part of the reasoning for continuing challenges at Waterbury is at the crossroads location on the main route between Tunbridge and Maidstone. The crossroads is significantly constrained by built environment, and KCC highways have been unable to secure suitable adjustments which may aid the situation. Existing improvements in AQ in recent years will therefore be likely due to those reasons already given for other AQMAs where full compliance has been achieved. But just I thought I'd highlight that for members here tonight and obviously for the public. And then finally, 6.2. The Waterbury AQMA is unlikely to meet the revocation criteria in the near future and will be TNBC's sole AQMA if other AQMAs mentioned in 6.1 are revoked, and indeed they were revoked. So Waterbury is the only AQMA we've got. And if we're taking into account further development like this and taking into account what this report reported to the Scrutiny Committee on the 5th of November, it just highlights the problem with Waterbury. It's a serious problem. Thank you.
Councillor Tatton.
Thank you, Chair. Just dealing with Greenbelt first, I wanted to quote from what I think is the Stage 2 Greenbelt study, something that I don't think is in the committee report. And it says, and I will quote word for word, it's quite a long paragraph. It says the presence of development within the Greenbelt to the north and northeast additionally means that the sub-area's removal would be likely to contribute to an increased perception of sprawl along the A26 Tunbridge Road, undermining the wider Greenbelt's role in safeguarding the countryside from encroachment. The release of the sub-area in isolation would enclose an area of Greenbelt to the southwest of the sub-area, and then I think in essence it says, well, that's not really a problem because it's part of the playing fields and it's managed differently. But it then goes on. However, the sub-area's topography, which descends away from Waterbury to the southeast, means that development within the sub-area would likely be visible from further afield and would undermine the wider Greenbelt sense of openness. The release of the sub-area in isolation would also result in a narrow strip of Greenbelt to the east between Waterbury and the edge of the metropolitan Greenbelt. The narrowness of this strip of Greenbelt may compromise the integrity and performance of the wider Greenbelt. So I just wanted to make sure that we take that into account when we're looking at the whole Greenbelt issue. If I could also just comment on landscape, and others have already covered some of what I might have said. But in terms of landscape, the applicants themselves accept that there will be an overall change. There'll be substantial, major, moderate and negative harm. So the fact of harm isn't a matter of dispute, I don't think, but sort of just to set out my own concerns, I think principally these are around the loss of views over the site towards the other side of the valley, and then from the valley looking back northwards again. The Medway Valley is really very distinctive. It's highly valued for its views. It's got a significant draw in terms of leisure and recreation along this stretch, both within our borough and within Maidstone with the nearby Teeston Country Park. And certainly from Maidstone's perspective, I think as Councillor Bolton noted, they've got identified as a landscape of local value. Also, there's a long-standing Article 4 down on the river between Teeston and Wateringbury, as a means to try and control development there. And I think various efforts of the parish councils have tried to, keep some sense of, what's great about this part of the borough. And forgive me for being perhaps a little bit whimsical, but I'd like to quote from William Cobbett, who was it sounds as if you may know what I'm referring to, rural rides. And he travelled through Maidstone to Merryworth. And he said, from Maidstone to this place, Merryworth, is about 7 miles. And these are the finest 7 miles that I have ever seen in England or anywhere else. And obviously that's a long time ago. And things do change, but that's a real pat on the back for the Medway Valley. And if there's something special about it, we need to be careful not to lose it. From the north side of the Tunbridge Road and Fields Lane, you get that view over to the other side. From the south side, you get the views back from Hunt Street. You've got the 3 public footpaths that actually come down the valley, and you've got really clear views, unobstructed views, elevated back towards the other side. And obviously Wateringbury has expanded over time from Bow Road eastwards. But I think there's, to some degree that this site provides an element of containment and a green wedge on that eastern side. And the houses that are up on the Tunbridge Road, the sort of finger of development there, the ribbon development is pretty discreet in both senses of that word. They've got long undeveloped verdant gardens at the rear, and they keep development back towards the top of the valley instead of it creeping down towards the river. So I think as a whole, these views in and out are really important to Wateringbury. One of the speakers really hit the nail on the head for me. It gives Wateringbury that sense of place. You understand its relationship to the valley. I guess there's a clue in the name, Wateringbury. And any retained views across the valley from the Tunbridge Road would be barely discernible because at the moment, certainly on the proposed plan, the curvature of the Spine Road doesn't create a vista down to the river. It's not to the river, down and across the valley rather. It's curves off. You wouldn't see anything through it, and I don't think you'd see much from the emergency access either. You'd need a really strong landscape along the frontage to deal with the noise and to deal with the pollution. So all in all, I think what you end up with is a disconnect of those views from Wateringbury, and it's the last bit along the Tunbridge Road in Wateringbury where you have any sense of being able to look down over the valley. Also, just to reference dark skies, because I saw something as I was reading through, I think it was probably CPRE's dark skies map. And obviously there is overspill of light from adjacent residential areas, but the theme in the valley is that it's dark. And for every encroachment further into the valley, you introduce an additional impact. And I don't think it's right to say that just because there's some adjacent lighting that it makes it okay to introduce more lighting into the valley. Teeston doesn't actually have any lights at all. It's completely dark, and it manages very well, and it's got low crime rates. So I struggle with the obsession with lighting in any case, but in a dark valley like this, it's not sensitive. And just on the traffic and pollution, because we've heard a lot about that already, but it's not unusual just to emphasise, it's not unusual for traffic to back up to roughly where this access would be. And that really causes problems at the zebra crossing. If you're heading east, you've got traffic queuing towards you, and you can't often see if someone's going to step out, and it's really quite worrying. And of course, you would if all this comes to fruition and people are going to walk everywhere, we're going to have people crossing the road and getting the bus, aren't we? So, and nothing's really, that's not addressed at all. I don't know quite what you do, how you stop people parking or stopping either side of the zebra crossing, but there would also be a similar situation with the access, where you would then have cars coming out trying to turn right between, you know, the row of queuing vehicles. Coming towards the end, but Councillor Betts mentioned the air quality report from 2025. And I was looking at that as well. It sets out a whole load of measures for tackling air quality generally across the borough. But in relation to the Wateringbury Crossroad, it said that further additional measures not yet prescribed will be required in subsequent years to achieve compliance and enable the revocation of the AQMA4 at Wateringbury. And aside from this MOVA system, there's nothing significant in the mitigation measures proposed by the applicant that are over and above those general recommendations in that report, which were said at the time to be insufficient for Wateringbury. And my concern with the MOVA is that it might improve flow for a time, and then what will happen is that the word will get around that traffic's moving nicely through the crossroads, and that in turn will attract more vehicles, and we'll be back to square one, and it will all grind to a halt again. So I don't think a temporary increase in efficiency equates to satisfactory mitigation. And I think the situation at the crossroads is so fragile. And if we get it wrong, then we let the residents of Wateringbury down, we let the residents in East Malling down because the traffic ends up there, and in other places as well. You know, I think we have to think really, really carefully about whether this is right. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just, from my own point of view, I'd like it minuted that when we've got something as sensitive as this with the issues that we've always had in Wateringbury with the crossroads, I would like to see KCC put in a proper report rather than just no objections, and even turn up to one of these meetings to actually present to us. So I'd like that minuted, please. Councillor Borton, is anybody else like to speak? Oh, right, okay. Hunter Banks.
Well, I'll agree with you more loudly, to be quite honest, because I think the whole thing, this has happened time and time again. I think the whole thing is where sometimes it appears where common sense is completely overrun by the fact that we have a county council that basically makes no comment and basically or doesn't get involved in the argument. I must admit, I'm pleased they're not involved in the air quality issue, because I think we'd get exactly the same response for them. But I really do think it is appalling, so I would support what you were saying.
Councillor Crisp.
I mean, it's pretty much been said. Everything I was going to say. I mean, which is great. I mean, having listened to it all, I can understand why people are confused and upset at the threat of more housing in the area. What I do not understand is how the NPPF gives clear guidelines as to why this application is an inappropriate development. Yet when it comes to procedural matters, such as the 5-year housing supply provision, all the valid reasons for refusal seem to go out the window. And I don't really know why that is. Surely with the overall picture of what is happening across the borough, common sense must prevail over procedural matters. I do not take into account practical considerations and views of residents. So officers I know have a difficult job contending with the pressure of approving housing applications to meet unachievable government housing figures, together with wading through new vague housing policy, the grey belt. So on a general note, and quite simply, I believe this application will create more harm than good. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Getting the general feeling of the meeting. Anybody else? Councillor Borton, would you like to come back and make a proposal at all, or?
I'm very happy to. I think there's three issues. There's the grey belt issues that Sarah discussed in relation to paragraph 155 of the MPPF, and this constitutes an inappropriate development in the green belt, and also there being substantial harm to openness through the scale of development proposed on what is largely a greenfield site, and therefore there's no very special circumstances that can be applied. In terms of air quality, which is where I started, I think we can make a case, and I'm not sort of like doing this word for word because I'm conscious. I'm sure the officers will come back, and be really good if we can collaborate together on getting a good grounds for refusal before we vote. But with regards to air quality, I think again we can make a case that it's contrary to paragraph 199 of the MPPF and policy SQ4 of the Managing Development and the Environment Development Plan document, due to the deterioration in air quality that I won't repeat because we've discussed. And then principally for me, based on what I said, is in relation to the clear landscape harm, and that the proposal, by virtue of its impact on the highly sensitive Medway Valley between Maidstone and Waterbury, is contrary to paragraph 188 of National Planning Policy Framework, policy CP14 of the core strategy, and the Middle Medway Valley landscape character area. So in a nutshell, I think they're the three reasons that we should explore and that I'd put forward as a proposal.
Thank you. Mr. Bailey, would you like to come back with them?
Yeah, I think we'll start on effectively greenbelt terms, I think, first and foremost, because that's, I mean, there's three grounds that have been put forward. We haven't articulated actually what they'll be, but I think I have to obviously turn around and say the officer's report assesses the greenbelt policy terms, looks at the test, looks at paragraph 155. I could go into a lot of detail about the evidence base. The evidence base clearly defines site as grey belt. I think that's undisputable, but that is only an initial assessment. It's only a provisional assessment as clearly set out in the greenbelt guidance, and then the second effectively tier of tests then becomes the DM test, which the case officer has done in this context and gone through the relevant tests. And I'm not going to go through the detail of report because I think it's quite clearly set out what those tests are and how this site conforms to those tests. So I think if members were to go about a grey belt terms, I would say that that is an unsustainable ground going forward. If that were to come forward, for the reasons I think particularly well articulated in the officer's report, and as set out in a definition. So I clearly don't think there is a ground to take forward to question effectively whether the site is grey belt and whether we then go down to the 155 tests and whether it meets those tests, because your officer's report clearly says it does meet the test, and even the evidence base, which members have to consider is material. It is down to the decision maker to determine what weight to apply to that. But unless you've got any other evidence in front of you that applies another test or assessment to grey belt, then in my view, you apportion something that you've actually released as your evidence base to inform your Reg 18, as I would say that should carry more weight in this instance, because that is the only available evidence that we have on grey belt assessment. So I think on grey belt, I would turn round to members and would advise against any ground. With regard to air quality, I mean, obviously, again, your officer's report has set that out in the officer's report. You have the council's EHO who has considered the application and raised no objection on terms of air quality grounds. There was an issue of whether he requested a contribution to air monitoring equipment, but on the basis of Bill 122 tests, that was discounted, given the evidence that had come forward. So again, on that basis, I think if members were to mount a ground on air quality, which hasn't been supported, you would have to get an independent view from an independent assessor, because the council's EHO could not defend an air quality ground. So we would have to go out into the market and look to see if there's anyone that would defend that ground. because your officers in the council could not defend it because they say that there is no objection. So again, I would have to say that that ground would be unsustainable. With regard to landscape, I mean, obviously, again, the same principles apply to the evidence. You've got both the evidence that informed the Reg 18 plan, you've got the landscape sensitivity testing assessment, which was individually of 3 pieces of landscape evidence that the council haven't commissioned previously before, that weren't in the core strategy, that are now in the evidence base for the Reg 18. Appreciate that the Reg 18 itself carries little weight, but obviously the evidence base, again, down to the decision maker, how much weight to apply. That's down to you as decision makers, how much weight to apply to that evidence. But again, that evidence does not rule out residential development in the site, both in the landscape sensitivity testing and also the landscape and visual appraisal assessment, that it said up to 2.5 story, effectively small scale, which is defined as 2.5 story development, could be accommodated on this site. Appreciate, obviously, at that stage, it is only a sort of a high level assessment and not a detailed assessment. You have that in front of you, and this application seeks to retain. I mean, I've heard a lot of members mention the importance of retaining views across the Medway Valley, which the application proposal does seek to address, try to address that point by having an open vista from north to south, from Tunbridge Road to the south. So to a degree, it retains that vista of the valley. Appreciate the fact in different areas it will be different, and that is recognised in the LVIA, the applicant's LVIA, and it's also recognised in the overall high level assessment. But again, that's down to the decision maker, members, as to how much weight you apply to that. But I would refer you to section 38(6 of the Planning Compulsory Purchase Act, which says decisions should be taken in accordance with the development plan unless material indications indicate otherwise. So if you rely on a third party evidence base, i.e. the Maidstone evidence base, which I think Councillor Bolton referred to, then that's not a decision in accordance with 38(6. So that's not part of your or Tunbridge and Morling's development plan. Now, again, it's down to a decision maker to apportion what weight to apply that, but you are duty bound to make decisions in accordance with section 38(6. So in accordance with the development plan, unless material indications indicate otherwise. And as I say, the Maidstone local plan is not part of the development plan for Tunbridge and Morling. So you'd have to make that assessment. You're relying on evidence which is not adopted and it's not as part of our development plan. So, I mean, that's the advice. I think I'll pass over to the case officer to see if she wishes to add to anything to those points. But I think clearly on the 2 points, grey belt, green belt and air quality, whilst I haven't heard the grounds at this stage, there are no, and unfortunately I have to say, members, you have to give significant weight to your statutory consultees, which are KCC in this instance, the Highway Authority, who have raised no objection in terms of traffic. I know that hasn't been raised as a ground cited, but and also the council's EHO hasn't raised an issue on air quality subject to conditions being imposed, and obviously that is set out in your report as well. So those 2 grounds, I think I would have to come back and say that I feel that they would be unsubstantiated, but I obviously I haven't heard the detailed grounds. Landscaped is slightly more subjective. Again, you need to refer to the evidence. Members could come up with a conclusion in terms of that the landscape doesn't reflect the special characteristics of the site. I would say that's it's still a hard ground to defend because the council couldn't go to its evidence base, couldn't go to its consultants who looked at the Reg 18 because they've already said that development of small scale is acceptable. So you've already got an experienced landscape consultant who've said development can be accommodated in this area. And that is a qualified landscape consultancy who the council have employed already. So the council would have to go and get expert evidence you were minded to refuse on landscape grounds and would have to go and get a landscape consultancy that would defend any ground. So it would be a lot harder. I'm not saying at this particular moment, because we haven't articulated the grounds, and I would suggest that we take a bit of time if members, after further discussion, wish us to sort of draft a ground and landscape in a bit more detail, so you have that to hand, and then we'd have to sort of look at whether we consider that's a defendable ground or not. But I'm going to hand to the case officer just to add anything further to that, if that's okay.
I just wanted to go back to the green belt, grey belt argument and just draw your attention that the MPPF at Annex 2 does actually provide a definition for grey belt. And this sets out that for the purposes of plan making and decision making, grey belt is defined as land in the green belt comprising previously developed land and or any other land that in either case does not strongly contribute to any of the purposes. And it specifically says A, B, or D in paragraph 143. It doesn't include any of the others. Grey belt excludes land where the application of policies relating to the area or assets in footnote 7 would provide a strong reason for refusing or restricting the development. And that also excludes green belt. We're not allowed to consider green belt. So for that purpose, that's why we've come to the conclusion that the site is grey belt.
Sorry, Councillor Taylor, I'll come back to you in a minute. Councillor Taylor and then Councillor Rowe.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I get the sense that we're possibly heading towards a refusal, which would mean a deferral for a cost report. Now, as we have a member of the legal team here tonight, would she be able to tell us off in the appropriate manner and save us all coming back here again in 2 months, and it can just go straight to full council then? Thank you.
Councillor Rhodes. Would you like to come? While
they're debating, yeah. What I'm about to say is probably not going to be very well received, but I've listened to it all tonight. I've thought about lots of other sites around our part of the world, and there are many sites within our borough that could be argued would destroy a landscape view. And I will say one of those is in my ward, 40 acres. It was quite a big objection to that site about the landscape views across to the North Downs, but it was sent to appeal and it was approved. We could all attempt to refuse on those grounds. However, if we refuse all of these sites with landscape problems, we would not achieve our 5-year land supply. So reluctantly, I think we have to take some of the strain on all wards and all parts of the borough. And it's going to be a pain for everybody. And we have to accept the advice of the planning officers and approve it. I do support Councillor Taylor's suggestion of a 90-degree turnaround. I think that would improve the situation dramatically. But I'm afraid I don't see a planning reason to refuse.
Thank you. Councillor Bolton, do you want to?
Yes, thank you. I'm going to respond to what James said, and I deliberately hadn't word for word articulated the wording because, as I said earlier, I think this should be a discussion that comes out during the course of the debate. So that was a deliberate policy by me. The green belt issue, I hear what the officers are saying on it. Obviously, grey belts, I'm conscious of lots of members of the public in the room, members of the public online. Grey belt does not mean grey land. It's a complete bad of a policy by the government to get more development on green belt land, period. And that's why it's causing us such headaches here and everywhere else. And it's completely rubbish, the whole policy. But it's a policy of the land and the law of the land, and we've got to deal with that in our planning decisions. I'm going to kind of park that because I want to focus on the other 2 points. The environmental health officer raised no objection, but Water Parish Council, as I said earlier, commissioned a report, an excellent report, if I can say that, which is from, bear with me, create. And that provides, in my view, very clear reasons as to why a ground on air quality could be substantiated at appeal. Now, I know our environmental health officer has reviewed that and come to a different conclusion. But essentially, what James was saying is that Tunbridge and Moorland wouldn't be able to use its environmental health officer to defend that ground of appeal, and we'd have to go to the market and get an independent assessor. Well, given that's exactly what Waterbury Parish Council have done, I would like to suggest that it wouldn't be too difficult for Tunbridge and Moorland to do that. I accept it means that our in-house officer would be ruled out, but this isn't going to be one of those cases, as we've had elsewhere, in which we don't find someone who could substantiate, or sorry, not substantiate their ground, who could help defend that and provide expert opinion at a potential appeal, because the parish council have done exactly that, and hats off to the parish council for doing it too. The third point is on the landscape issues. So I think there's a key point, Michelle Tatton raised it, about the vista. And if I go back right to what I said at the very start, this was going to be an outline application once upon a time, and then the developer, in response to 121 objections, none about it being an outline application, decided to submit a full application, a detailed application instead. But they haven't, and again, the curvature of the road is the key thing here. That does not create, you could, if the principle of development were to be established, you could actually create something quite nice with that view from the A26 heading down with sort of the right buildings, turning it around 90 degrees. You could just do much better than this, really. I'm not saying I agree with the principle of development. I'm just saying that you could have designed it much better than this, but they haven't done that. And therefore, I do think that there's merit in pursuing that further too. I understand the obligations of this council under section 38(6). I get it. But the problem we've got here is the borough boundary is in the way. Now, the Medway Valley, regardless of when people went walking or travelling from Maidstone to Merryworth, sort of forever, the borough boundary is kind of where the borough boundary is, and it just so happens to be that most of the area is in Maidstone Borough, other than Waterbury, really. But we're talking about harm on both sides. So we're talking about harm on the Tunbridge and Moorland side and on the Maidstone side too. Therefore, I think it's appropriate and necessary that we are to use evidence, adopted evidence, in the Maidstone local plan to demonstrate the harm, certainly on the Maidstone side. I think that's the right. I think it's appropriate. That's why that policy is in place. The policy doesn't stop because the impact on that side of the borough boundary is different, if you see what I mean. I mean, it's still got an impact on the south of the borough boundary, whether this was in Teeston, 100 yards to the east, Teeston Parish, or in Waterbury. I don't see that. And ultimately, that to me carries more weight than our documents published at the Regulation 18 consultation. Not because our documents aren't very good. I think our documents on this regard, generally speaking, are very good. And certainly when we did the consultation, there weren't that many responses that came back suggesting amendments across the borough. But it's at a really early stage. And this is what I really struggle with this application, which is that the application of evidence in our Regulation 18 plan is being used to justify giving planning permission for a site that isn't in the Regulation 18 plan. And it's just wrong, that. I'm sorry to say, it just really is wrong. But I veer a little bit. I'm not suggesting that that's the reason for refusal. I just suggest that that's where this committee seems to be having trouble. But I really, and it's heartening to see the officers suggest that actually there is a defendable ground of appeal on landscape. I would contend that there is one on air quality too that is defendable and does not need a costs decision. And obviously I haven't touched on the Greenbelt issue too, but I hope that sort of helps address some of the concerns that James had articulated.
Okay, Mr. Bailey would like to come back.
Yeah, I think I need to come back on the point of using third-party commissioned evidence. Oops, because we have been there before at this committee, and I hate to raise it with the Ivy Farm application, where similarly independent commissioned conservation advice was used at the appeal. And it's not something that the council will usually rely on. And in that instance, I mean, obviously the appeal papers are in front of you today in terms of the updates on the report. And if the council are going, they wouldn't rely on third party because it's the council who defends the appeal. It's not the parish council who defends the appeal. So it's a very unusual practice for council to adopt a third party piece of evidence to defend an appeal because the council effectively has no control over that evidence. So what would usually happen in usual circumstances, and it has been set out in this room before, where the council disagreed and the council's conservation officer disagreed with the advice that was put forward for the Ivy Farm appeal, that independent commissioned work, and didn't effectively take that forward into the public inquiry, and that wasn't actually supported in the public inquiry through the planning inspector's decision. So I would just I think I need to note an issue of caution about using a third party piece of evidence. It's not something as standard practice that we would use. I'm not saying members can't do that, but it's the parish council. They're the ones that own the rights to that evidence. And it's not the council per se that have commissioned that piece of evidence, which is again why I say I think it would be very difficult to raise air quality because the council hasn't got its own independent and hasn't got its own expert on that basis. So I just have to issue a bit of cautionary approach on the air quality matter. But I think if we're going to move forward with grounds, it might be helpful to try to articulate some grounds that members are proposing. So at least we know what grounds we're looking at and framing some grounds so the debate can continue on that basis, if that's okay.
Councillor Betts.
Thank you, Chairman, for letting me come back. I'm going to throw something else in the ring here. I've already mentioned it. We've all mentioned, well, pretty much most of us have mentioned AQMAs, green belt, grey belt, landscape. But I'm going to throw this one into the ring again, and that's the Grade 1 land. It's been sort of digging at me a little bit, and especially when I've heard Councillor Rowell speak sort of in favour of the application on the basis that we need to build, etc., and it's landscape. But there's a slight difference here that this is Grade 1 land, and it sort of is digging at me a little bit, coin a phrase. And with my farming background, it's digging at me even more. I've done a little bit of reading up on it on the MPPF, and it seeks to protect Grade 1 land with the retention for food production, funnily enough, something that we desperately need in the UK, with a presumption against development. And it's described as BMV, best and most versatile land. So bearing in mind that there's only 3% of Grade 1 land in the whole of the UK, I just feel that maybe we should be focusing on this a little bit more, especially with its setting as well. I guess you're going to say that the weight given to Grade 1 land is not that weighted, which is a shame, bearing in mind that we need food for this country and we don't have a lot of Grade 1 land. But I guess that's probably going to be the answer. Thank you.
Okay, you want to come back?
I'm going to surprise you on this one to say that obviously the officer's report does give weight to that and says in the officer's report that the loss of Grade 1 land weighs against this proposal, and this is assessed in the balancing exercise, because in decisions there's never one application I know of that will meet a policy 100%, and the whole point of the balancing exercise that's been carried out by the officer is to weigh the pros and the cons. But what you have to, as decision makers, have to bear in mind that the council has 2.8 years of supply. Therefore, you're in significant and demonstrable territory. So what you have to do is balance. And in your decisions tonight, you have to make sure that you've weighed that balance, acknowledging that we haven't got a 5-year housing land supply. And if you come up with grounds of refusal, you have to consider that they significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of a 66 unit scheme that will come forward with 50% affordable housing, because there are factors which I know members may not like that weigh in favour of the proposal, and a significant one of those is a severe shortage of affordable housing, and this scheme looks at 50%. Not only that, it boosts the housing land supply. So members will need to bear that in mind, but agricultural land weighs against the proposal. That is very clearly set out in the report, and is something that officers have balanced that loss against the need and the benefits arising. So thank you.
Councillor Bolton, did you want to?
Well, yes, I do.
Robin's
Council chomping at the bit, and I'm not going to argue
and we also have
with Robin about agricultural land or farming or anything to do with farming.
we also, if you wanted to finish, also Councillor Boggs would like to. Yeah,
I just wanted a little clarification, which might help. Councillor Betts brought up the fact of the junction being the last junction in Kent that doesn't meet the standards regarding traffic pollution. Yet it seems to be that I would have thought that would have been an important issue, and that was an issue that the council would have evidence on. But it seems to be just sort of papered over. So obviously, maybe I've misunderstood it. Is it still the or the last junction out of many that has still got a traffic pollution problem in the borough? Sorry, in the borough.
Yes.
Right. Mr. Bailey suggested that we might want to adjourn this meeting to formulate the precise wording of grounds of refusal, which I would like to take you up on that offer. The reason being, I just think it'd be easier done by having a face-to-face conversation rather than just batting it round and forward for half an hour. But there is something on the air quality side that, just to clarify what I was saying, I wasn't saying that our defence is the Waterbury Parish Council report, because I'm sure the Parish Council, if this application is refused, would be using that as part of their defence. My point was that this council's in a position in which it can commission further independent evidence. That's perfectly acceptable for us to do, which may come to the same conclusion as the Waterbury Parish Council report. And I would suggest that's something we want to do, because clearly the Parish Council report, the Parish Council Commissioned report to be precise, has come to a different conclusion from the Environmental Health Officer. We shouldn't, and by the way, I really do rate our Environmental Health Officers. I'm not sort of intending to say they're wrong at all, but no one's right all of the time. And ultimately, we've got some evidence in front of us that suggests that actually there is a ground to refuse on that, and we have articulated quite strongly over the course of this that actually we are worsening the AQMA, the worst AQMA in the borough, and maybe in Kent.
Okay, we need to draw this together. Oh, last one, Mr. Chris, Councillor Chris.
Right, and well, I think the government figures, if I've got that right, is that 60 houses will create 100,000 extra vehicle journeys a year. So how will that not create a problem with the pollution, together with Hermitage Lane, Bradbourne, Ivy Farm, and all the others that are going on? It just seems absolutely ridiculous to me that that's not taken into account for future. Okay, what's happening now is what happens now. You look in 5 years' time, my goodness, we'd be in trouble.
Right, Councillor Bolton, do you wish to make a proposal to refuse, and on which grounds would? Well, yeah, do we want to do do we have a seconder to do that? Councillor Hudson or Councillor, number of seconders, but we need to get some wording and grounds put together to do that.
I'll read out what I had suggested before, which is essentially me reading what I had previously said, but this is a starter for 10, and I'd welcome professional advice. and the advice of any other member. So I'll start with the landscape element, because that's the first one in front of me. And the proposal, by virtue of its impact on the highly sensitive Medway Valley between Maidstone and Waterenbury, is contrary to paragraph 188 of the MPPF policy, CP14 of the core strategy, and the Middle Medway Valley landscape area. Whether we want to, let me clarify too. I should say we definitely need to include the layout in that too. I should have mentioned that at the start, and that the layout contributes to that. There is a lingering question that Robin raised about agricultural land, whether we want that as part of the same reason or as a separate refusal. I'll take advice on that. I'm comfortable either way. I think the Greenbelt one we kind of rehearsed earlier, so I won't do that again. Also because I can't find it on this particular bit of paper. And the third point with regards to air quality is that the proposal, by virtue of the impact on the air quality management area, or sorry, let me rephrase that, by virtue of the fact it would worsen the impact on the air quality management area, is contrary to paragraph 199 of the MPPF and policy SQ4 of the Managing Development and the Environment DPD.
Okay, so we have a proposal to refuse which has been seconded on the grounds that are being written down quickly now. Do you want to come back with wording, or how do you want to?
Well, what I would suggest, Chairman, is that we adjourn the meeting for approximately, I think we're probably going to need about 10 minutes to draft some grounds, and then we can come back, see if members agree with those grounds. And then obviously there would need to be an opportunity for officers to substantiate whether they are defendable grounds or not. And that obviously might necessitate the cost procedures that are set out in 15.24 of the Constitution. But yeah, if we could adjourn, if that's okay, for minutes.
So we will adjourn for 10 minutes. We will be back here at 25 past. Thank you. We're just going for a few more minutes. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, can we take our seats, please? Thank you. Just wait for our other councillors to return. Come along, Councillor Bolton. Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your patience. So we have before us a proposal for refusal. It has been seconded, and we are going to go over to Mr. Bailey, who is going to read the grounds that have been discussed. Go through. Would you like to?
I'm going to read
Okay,
them.
Susan.
We've
Right.
got 3 reasons. Air quality. The proposal, by virtue of the proximity of the development to the existing AQMA, would lead to the worsening of air quality in the AQMA, contrary to policy CQ4, the Managing Development and Environmental DPT, and paragraph 199 of the MPPF. Second one is landscape. The proposal, by virtue of the layout, loss of best and most versatile land, and important views into and out of the Medway Valley, would result in irreversible landscape harm to the detriment of this countryside location, contrary to paragraph 187 of the MPPF and core strategy policy CP14 and Maidstone Council's Medway Valley landscape character assessment. And the last one is Greenbelt. The proposal would constitute inappropriate development in the Greenbelt, contrary to policies contrary to paragraph 154 of the MPPF, for which no special circumstances have been demonstrated.
Councillor Bolton, are you happy with that wording?
I appreciate that was a very lengthy adjournment, but can I thank James Bailey and Sue Field for their excellent work on that, for helping articulate those grounds, including the reference in relation to agricultural lands to please Councillor Betts. And I think that very accurately sums up where we were going during the debate, and I'm happy to propose that. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Hudson has seconded. So we can go to a vote. Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
I apologise.
Yes, so apologies for that. Before we go to a vote, as per paragraph 50.2 of the Constitution, we do need to sort of consider whether those grounds are defendable or not. And as I previously alluded to, I think in terms of the air quality ground, I would raise concern on that on the basis that I don't think it's substantiated at this stage because the council's EHO and the council's own evidence hasn't substantiated that. I appreciate there is third-party evidence, but that is the parish council's evidence. And I previously said the council would have to commission its own, and it's not known at this stage what that evidence would say, whether it would agree with the REHO officer or whether it would disagree with it. And therefore, on that ground, I would have to say that that's an unsubstantiated ground at this stage. So I would put a cost warning on that particular stance. Also, with regard to Greenbelt, as I previously alluded to, I think the report is very clear. Our evidence, our own evidence, is the fact the site is grey belt, and therefore the ground that's put forward to go straight to the test of inappropriate development, I don't think can be defended, and I think that would be unsubstantiated as well. Therefore, I have to put a cost ground on that one as well, on paragraph 50.25. With regards to, and with both those elements, with regard, I previously raised concern with regard to the use and relying on a third-party landscape evidence, which would not be in accordance with section 38(6) of the Act, Compulsory Purchase Act. I think it would be prudent of me at this stage to include that ground, because obviously if members decide to take the other 2 grounds on air quality and in terms of Greenbelt forward, then there would be a cost report back to this committee. And I think that would be the opportunity to get legal advice into that report on relying on evidence on a third party. So I think it prudent at this stage. I'm not saying that the ground is unsubstantiated at this stage, because I've heard evidence that views into and out are important on that basis. And I think there could be a case that can be demonstrated, but I have a concern about relying on Mason Borough Council's evidence base. So I think it only prudent that I say at this stage that the legal officer's report would come back and give clarification on that point to members. Hopefully that gives a satisfactory overview in terms of the officer's view on that.
So we will take a vote, but it will mean that if the proposal is accepted, we would be having to defer for a costs report. Councillor Bull.
Yeah, shall I just perhaps explain to members of the public who don't follow planning committees week in, week out, what this actually means in practice? So what James has suggested there is doing actually what a very good officer should do, which is assisting us as the elected councillors in formulating the reasons for refusal, but also being very clear in terms of his professional advice that 2 of the 3 grounds can't be substantiated. And there is a clause in the Tunbridge and Moorland Borough Council Constitution, it's paragraph 15.24, which says that in that case, because planning is quasi-judicial, the council opens itself up, in James's opinion, to a risk of substantial costs, and therefore before the decision is confirmed, a paper has to come back to the next meeting of this committee, which is on the 1st of April, I believe, to essentially consider that paper, which will have some legal advice produced by Joy. That will be a private paper, so it won't be available to the public to look at, and then essentially, depending on what happens at the meeting, either the decision is taken or there's an escalation route to full council afterwards. So I just thought it'd be worth saying that before we vote, because I don't want members of the public here, if these recommendations do go through, to think that that's the end of it. It isn't the end of it. Now, if I can just comment on that, I hear what the officers say. I'm not a professional planner. I'm just a layman who has been elected, so I'm not going to pretend I know any more about planning than planning officers. And that's absolutely their right within the Constitution to do so. But obviously what I have heard is that one of the 3 grounds in the officers' minds could, not saying can, could potentially be substantiated at appeal. Well, given that the other 2 are going to be tested, I do understand the reason you may as well test all 3, because the paper's coming back anyway. And I see Joy nodding as the author of that paper. I'm sure that's what she'll do. But I thought, Chair, before we vote, it might be helpful to explain what we're actually voting on to members who don't tune into all of our meetings.
Okay, we also have to hear from our legal department, who will be reading the Constitution for us so that we know what we're doing.
So I've now come to Councillor Taylor's part that he was asking for earlier. So in accordance with Council and Committee Procedure Rules 15.24, as James and Councillor Bolton have alluded to, it states there, if contrary to a recommendation of the Director of Planning, Housing and Environmental Health, an area planning committee is minded to determine an application in a way or on grounds which the Director does not consider can be substantiated, a resolution by the committee to make such a determination will be a recommendation only, and the application shall stand adjourned to the next meeting of the committee to enable the Director of Central Services and the Monitoring Officer to submit a report on the possibility of costs or compensation being awarded against the Council in the event that the application is determined in that way. At the next meeting, depending on how the votes go tonight, if the Director of Central Services and Monitoring Officer's report indicates that there is likely to be a risk of significant costs being awarded against the Council at any appeal or potential liability to pay compensation, the committee may not determine the application in a manner contrary to the advice set out in the report, and a resolution by the committee to make such a determination will be a recommendation only, and the application shall stand adjourned to the Council for determination. So depending on how the vote goes this evening, if it's a refusal, then it's a recommendation only. It's not, a determination that's been made this evening. So once the vote has gone through, I'll come back to this section and just clarify what's happening.
Okay, we'll move to a vote. So if you are voting for agree, you are voting for refusal of the application. So I'll ask Victoria to take a. No? Oh, do I know? I agree.
Councillor Banks.
Agree.
Councillor Betts.
Agree.
Councillor Bolton.
4.
Councillor Crisp.
Agree.
Councillor Hudson.
4.
Councillor Roud.
Reluctantly against.
Councillor Tanner.
4.
Councillor Tatton.
4.
Councillor Taylor.
4.
That's 7 in favour and 1.
So we have voted to refuse, but as Joy has already stated, that is only a recommendation. And we'd like to clarify that, John.
Yeah, so as I've read out in 15.24, the recommendation tonight is to vote against the officer's recommendation. So this it stands as a recommendation only. It's not a determination of the application. So I'd have to prepare a cost report, a legal cost report, to be reviewed by members for the next planning committee. And at that meeting, it's just the cost report that's going to be reviewed. There will be no public speaking at that meeting. So at that meeting, our members will decide whether to proceed with their refusal or to decide to approve the application. If they decide to refuse it, then that will be a recommendation, only depending on, obviously what the cost report says. And if it states that there'll be significant costs, so that would stand as a recommendation and will go to full council for determination. Thank you.
So that is the end of our proceedings for this application. Thank you very much for your patience, and even more for the people who are still waiting outside for the next 3 we've got to do tonight. If you'd like to make your way out, we can actually get the next batch in. Thank you. Okay, we're adjourning for 5 minutes to get the next batch in, if we can. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience over the last one. But as you see, we do take our job very seriously and have full debate. Can I just remind you, some of you may not have heard my declaration at the very beginning, that you are not in a public rally or a public meeting. So therefore, there's no applause, there's no derision. You are just observers in this committee. Thank you. So let's crack on. This is an application for Black Horse Inn Tumblefield Road in Stansted. So Susan, you're going to do our presentation, please.
Thank you, Chair. Planning permission is sought for part change of use of the public house to form 2 one-bed and 2 two-bed apartments with associated parking, amenity space, and the use of the existing access. This is the existing ground floor plan. The part change of use involves the conversion of part of the ground floor to form 2 studio apartments. You can see those in the coloured on the plan. Access via a existing side door. The first floor currently comprises 4-bedroom accommodation, and this is proposed to be split into two-bedroom units. The cellar will remain the same and part of the public house. This is the proposed block plan. It shows the parking and access, which remains the same, albeit that the parking is now more formally laid out. Small area to the rear would be formed to provide a communal area for the benefit of the dwellings. The entrance and seating to the front of the public house remains unchanged. And then I've just got a couple of site photos. This one's looking at the car park area and the entrance, and the public house is there on the right-hand side. The next one is the public house within the street scene. You can just see the seating out the front there. My last slide is, again, the public house in the street scene, but looking in the opposite direction. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Our first speaker is Yvonne Tisson. Is that how you pronounce? Oh, sorry, there was a change. Right, Brian Shaw. You come to here. If you then press the red button, you have 3 minutes to speak. You're going to no notes. I'm very impressed. No notes, no. So the one on the right-hand side, and then I will take your 3-minute timing from when you start speaking.
Good, okay. I'm one of the oldest residents in Stansted. I moved there 26 years ago, and one of the reasons I moved there because of the community. Prior to moving to Stansted, I visited the pub on numerous occasions, and it really gave me a sense of real community. Bearing in mind that pub has been a pub since 1841, which is incredible. And it's remained part of the community since then, until over 3 years ago, or three and a bit years ago, when this individual bought the pub out of the feet of somebody who lived opposite the pub and renting it, wanted to buy the pub and run it as a pub. But this guy, obviously, on the proposal that he was going to run the pub, he put in one of his relatives. Clearly, from day one, they weren't embraced the community, not the way that I wanted to see it, and the pub deteriorated. I mean, the food deteriorated over time. The pub became dirty. Dog excrement in the gardens, which people then stopped using the pub, and a large amount of people surrounding the pub in the local villages used to visit the pub, and they stopped going simply because the way the pub deteriorated. And of course, the thing is, I think the plan to begin with was actually, and knowing that what I've read about it, that the person in question is a developer, and I think that the purpose at the time was to develop the pub. Now, the other amazing thing is, he's taken down 28 trees, and I don't know if you're aware of the fact that it's in conservation area, and there was no planning applied for. Now there's retrospective planning for 28 trees. So clearly the guy was in breach of the planning thing, and nobody seemed to. And we haven't heard anything back as regarding the planning. I believe it's in I think appeal at the moment, a retrospective appeal. So quite frankly, I think it's disgusting the way the guys allowed the pub. And just one final bit, the pub is a community. The people would visit the pub, and we, on a regular basis, and it was part of our community. And then people went to the pub, enjoyed the pub until this guy took over the pub. I think it's a great shame, and I hope that we can resurrect the pub. There's serious people who want to resurrect the pub, and quite frankly, I think I wish for the day that we can reopen the pub, because at the moment the pub is now a complete eyesore. And we do have a pop-up pub in the village hall the last Friday of each month, and the attendance on average of that is probably about 80 people. But on the first meeting we had about how to go about trying to buy the pub back, I think there was something like about 180 people. Okay, thank you.
This is Chair of Stansted Parish Council.
Good evening. My name is Yvonne Tisson and I'm Chair of Stansted Parish Council. I ask for your help in protecting the living heart of our village, the Black Horse Public House. and I urge you to refuse this application. This is not simply about a building. It is about the loss of our village's primary social and cultural communal space. The officer's report concludes that the loss of the pub is acceptable because alternative facilities exist. We strongly disagree. There is no alternative public house within the catchment. Reference is made to our parish pop-up pub evenings, but these operate for just a few hours once a month in a village hall under a temporary licensing. They were created in response to the pub's closure, not as a replacement for it. They are evidence of demand, not surplus provision. Similarly, suggestions that the village hall could be substituted for a public house fundamentally misunderstands the role a pub plays in rural community life. A pub is an informal, daily, intergenerational meeting place, somewhere people socialise, integrate and support each other's mental health. For many, particularly single residents and new arrivals, it is the only accessible social space. The Black Horse has fulfilled this role continuously for 193 years. It sits at the centre of the village, opposite the church, forming part of Stansted's historic and social core. Its communal value is not theoretical. It is lived and evidenced in the strength of local support, 284 objections, and the willingness of residents to invest financially to secure its future. Policy CP26 and the NPPF are clear. Community facilities should not be lost unless there is clear evidence of lack of need or adequate alternative provision. Neither exist here. If this application is approved, the village does not simply lose floor space, it loses its communal anchor. The proposed offer of a token pub, reduced by more than half and stripped of function, is not viable and cannot replicate what would be lost. Villages rely on a small number of shared spaces to remain socially sustainable. We fought successfully to retain our school. We have invested in our church, but the Black Horse plays a vital role of holding our community together. Councillors, we ask you to recognise its irreplaceable community role and refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Daisy Estrada.
Good evening, councillors. My name is Daisy Estrada and I've lived in the parish for 40 years. I'm a hybrid planning and conservation officer at another local authority and I'm a member of the Black Horse Project Steering Group. I have advised the group alongside an independent planning consultant, a conservation specialist, a public house viability expert, and most recently, a planning barrister. The application rests on the claim that the Black Horse is no longer commercially viable. Yet this has not been demonstrated in a policy compliant, transparent, or publicly scrutinised way. First, there has been no active marketing on the pub, required for at least 18 months under the Community Facility Policy Test. Without this, it is impossible to conclude that there is no operator demand or commercial future. Second, the viability material relied upon by the officer has not been made public. It has not been independently tested and its assumptions cannot be scrutinised. By contrast, the only public evidence, the independent RICS assessment commissioned by the parish, concludes that a viable pub operation remains achievable, particularly as a food-led business with B&B accommodation. Third, the trading history is unreliable. The current owners operated the pub for less than 2.5 years before closing. During that time, key revenue streams, food and the B&B, were removed, staffing was reduced and hours limited. Those are operational decisions, not proof of non-viability. Policy tests do not ask whether one operator failed, but whether the use is viable in competent hands. We know there is market interest. We know there are alternative operators, and we know the community itself is willing and able to run it itself. Viability is only one part of the planning balance. An independent heritage assessment confirms the Black Horse is a non-designated heritage asset of high local significance and is a positive building within the conservation area. There has been a pub on this site for nearly 2 centuries, giving it very high communal value with historic significance. The proposal would cause harm to historic and communal significance, harm to group value, weakening the historic church-inn relationship, and harm to the conservation area. No evidence has been provided to show that such a drastically reduced micro-pub could succeed in such a rural location or represent the building's optimum viable use. So we have no marketing, no transparent viability evidence, no independent review of the applicant's case, and clear professional evidence of heritage harm and viable alternatives. In planning terms, that means no policy tests for loss of community facility and for harm to heritage asset have not been met. On that basis, the conclusion of non-viability is unsound and the heritage harm is unjustified. For these reasons, refusal is not only justified, it's defensible.
David Epps. Epps, sorry.
Good evening, councillors. My name's David Epps. I'd like to speak to you about solutions, specifically the work of the Black Horse Project Steering Group, of which I am a member. This is not a nostalgic campaign resisting change. It is a structured, evidence-led effort to secure a viable future for the pub. The steering group formed immediately after the Black Horse closed in October 2024. Since then, a volunteer team supported by the Parish Council funding for professional advice has worked extensively to develop a deliverable community ownership model. Our work has included engagement with Plunkett UK, the national body supporting community-owned pubs, consultation with CAMRA and other community groups, visits to successful community-run pubs, including the Swan in West Peckham, just down the road from here. Thoroughly recommend it. Potential investor expressions of interest, community surveys on how the pub should operate, and preparation of a detailed evidenced business plan. The intended vehicle is a community benefit society, a regulated structure that cannot pay above market value and must demonstrate long-term financial sustainability. We repeatedly approached the owner to purchase the pub at fair market value. Access for survey was refused. We were asked to pay £1.5 million despite the site being purchased for £500,000 in 2022 as a functioning business. We were also asked to prove that we had funds in the bank before the owner would even proceed. Despite this preposterous demand, we submitted a formal offer at the same £0.5 million level with a commitment to match any independently verified higher valuation. The suggestion that the community sought a discount is simply incorrect. This is not speculative. Across the UK, more than 215 pubs have been successfully community purchased with survival rates of 97.5%, significantly higher than private pubs. We are therefore presenting a credible, funded, policy-aligned alternative use that retains the building, sustains the business and preserves its community function. In planning terms, that is highly material. Where a viable alternative exists that safeguards the community facility and heritage asset, loss should not be permitted. We are not asking you to take a risk. We are asking you to allow a proven model to proceed. Refusing this application keeps that opportunity alive. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Greg Whitaker.
Good evening. My name's Greg Whitaker. I'm speaking as a local resident, a publican and pub owner in Tunbridge Wells. The Black Horse was my local up until new management forced it to close. 14 years ago, my local in Tunbridge Wells closed its doors after 120 years of trading as a hotel and public house, after the previous landlord ran it into the ground. After a lengthy 18-month battle with planning and Green King, we managed to save our pub from being split up into a house on one side, 4 flats over a reduced size pub premises, which is almost identical to what is being proposed today at the Black Horse. It was rejected on grounds of viability, noise concerns, parking, and objections from local residents, of which there was about 80. This is a fraction compared to over the 280 objections you have received here. 12 years on, and I own a thriving and much-loved freehouse, giving the community a pub it so greatly needed. The key to its success was a modest refurbishment, then bringing in friendly, efficient management, creating local employment, and listening to what our community really wanted. For the past year, I have been running a temporary pop-up pub at Stansted Village Hall, 3.5 hours once a month with a temporary license and a makeshift bar. This is well attended and is the only thing holding the community together at the moment. But this doesn't provide food, only limited drinks, and lacks the everyday traditional pub environment we all once had. The pop-up pub was only intended as a temporary solution, strengthening our campaign to save our local, not an alternative. It just shows that the demand is here and stronger than ever. For the Black Horse to survive, a food offering is essential draw for any go-to destination country pub. With the new plans that are proposed for this pub area, it will not provide nearly enough space, and the loss of a commercial kitchen will mean it will have to be a wet lead pub. The majority of pubs that don't offer food rely heavily on footfall, late night licensing, live events, accommodation, pub games, and a large capacity in order to survive, which the reduced Black Horse just won't have. Not to mention the poor residents above who will be subject to early morning keg deliveries, waste collection, general public, and the everyday noise of an operating pub. I know, I lived above mine for 5 years and I wouldn't wish it on anyone. From a publican's perspective, I wouldn't even think about taking this so-called bar premises with no landlord's accommodation. It would be impossible to make a profit and quickly become redundant, and probably conveniently converted into a final flat. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Tom Selden.
Good evening, councillors. My name is Tom Sheldon, and I have lived in the parish since 1954. In my time here, we have lost 4 pubs, and this is the last one standing. It is the reason why our local community is so passionate to save our last remaining pub, and we are looking for your support. You will have read our planning experts' report. You have now heard our evidence on community value, viability, delivery, and heritage. I want to draw those strands together. Firstly, the community. There is no alternative facility. The pop-up pub runs for a few hours once a month. It exists because the pub closed, not to replace it. The Black Horse is the only everyday social space where people integrate, support one another, and combat rural isolation. Policy CP26 is clear. You cannot lose a community facility without proving lack of need. That has not been demonstrated. Secondly, viability. There has been no marketing of the pub as a going concern. Yet we know there is interest, including from the community itself. We have made a formal offer to buy the pub at market value. Independent professional advice that we have submitted confirms the existing pub as a food-led offer, and in this case with B&B accommodation, can succeed as it has done successfully since 1833. Conversely, a 50% smaller wet-led micro pub, stripped of food and its B&B accommodation, is unsupported by viability evidence and is fundamentally unsuited to a rural village setting. Lastly, heritage. The Black Horse is a non-designated heritage asset and a positive building within the conservation area. Proposed development would result in harm to the character and appearance of the Stansted Conservation Area and its significance as a non-designated heritage asset, which has not been outweighed by public benefit as required by national policy. So the position is clear. There is no alternative facility, no proven lack of need. There has been no marketing, no transparent viability evidence, and there is identified heritage harm. There is a willing purchaser at market value and a deliverable community solution. For these reasons, the application conflicts with the core strategy, the emerging plan, and NPPF policies already mentioned. On these policies alone, refusal is justified and defensible. Please refuse permission. Thank you.
We now have the agent, Paul Nichols.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sure many members will know that planning is often subjective, but on this occasion, so much that goes in favour of this proposal is a matter of fact. Firstly, multiple greenbelt exceptions apply to this development. It's a simple change of use of an existing building. It involves a redevelopment of an entirely brownfield site that doesn't impact on openness. Whilst given the proposal is limited to a change of use and there is a demonstrable need for housing, we say it would also benefit from the grey belt exception. Remember, only one exception is needed for it to be appropriate. It's noted that the parish council's consultant suggests it fails to comply with greenbelt policy because we aren't providing affordable housing. But this isn't a major housing proposal, and so there is no requirement for affordable housing. They also allude to the pub being completely lost and that it should be refused for a lack of B&G. But by way of a couple of key facts, the pub is to be retained and the development is B&G exempt. These aren't disbenefits, they're just not relevant. It seems their consultant hasn't fully understood the relevant policies or the nature of the proposal. On viability, it's a matter of fact that the existing pub has not made money for over 10 years throughout various tenancies, pre and post-COVID, and including when the pub was offering food. Publicly accessible documents confirm this. The parish council has paid for a viability assessment looking at the proposed pub. This is not the policy test, so this again is irrelevant. That said, it's worth noting that it is a matter of fact that the parish council's viability expert has previously produced evidence to support an application to lose an entire pub with a floor area akin to the Black Horse. Catchment, 11,000. Compare that to Stansted's population of 500. In any case, his views on the likely success of a micropub are subjective. Our evidence of sustained losses beyond the last 10 years is factual. It's a matter of fact that pubs akin to the existing one have declined by over 25% throughout the last 23 years, whilst micropubs have risen by 400% in the last 10 years. These facts are not supportive of any suggestion that a micropub is less likely to be viable. Finally, it's a matter of fact that since making this application, this authority's 5-year housing land supply has got worse. The proposal aims to deliver 4 self-contained residential units. Your starting position, members, is therefore one of approval, unless the disbenefits significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. For the reasons I've set out, no policy conflict exists, meaning there are no disbenefits. With the support of your officers and technical experts, it is therefore our position that there are clear factual reasons to support this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Betts.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, speakers. For me, this has been an interesting application, but I've been through the report in detail, so I will be referring to each paragraph of the report as I go through my sort of summary of what I see before me. The key areas of concern for me are viability past, viability future, support stroke demand, past performance, and then the noise potential issue of part residential, part pub. And then I'm going to finally end with the appeal that was dismissed in regards to Trosley, the Plough pub at Trosley, which is now a thriving community pub. So I'll start with the viability concerns. I think what I'll do first of all is read the criterion for 3 of policy CP26. Proposals for development that would result in the loss in the whole or part of sites and premises currently or last used for the provision of community services or recreation, leisure or cultural facilities will only be proposed in the LDF or otherwise permitted if. This is where, in my view, things go a little bit wrong for this application. A, an alternative facility of equivalent or better quality and scale to meet identified need is either available or will be satisfactorily provided at an equally accessible location. That I have a problem with in terms of the proposed location, which is the very small part of what's left of that main pub. B, a significant enhancement to the nature and quality of an existing facility will result from the development or part of that facility. And then C, the applicant has proved to the satisfaction of the council that for the foreseeable future there is likely to be an absence of need or adequate support for the facility. I think, as you can see by tonight, C doesn't quite strike the chord either. So referring to 6.6, viability statement on behalf of the council. Para 6.6 seems to, in my view, to be far too dismissive of a professional report prepared by an expert in the field regarding the viability of the retained floor area. It is not just a personal view, but a detailed document. It correctly highlights that the applicants have not provided any evidence to support this claim that there has been a loss-making pub for many years. I understand that this is based on Companies House data, but this is not a reliable source of information. It is not a profit and loss account that could be, it is not a profit or loss account that could be manipulated, for example, by paying excessive salaries to increase losses or for other expenditure. These types of accounts only show what the directors want them for the small companies. Neither have they been uploaded to the website, which concerns me from a procedural perspective. 6.54 also mentions viability statement, but this doesn't appear on the file either. The report then mentions 2 case studies together with an assessment on the viability of micropubs. These don't seem to be uploaded either, but I'm not sure how relevant the assessment of whether the loss of this pub has been satisfactorily justified as a community facility protected by CP26. The relevant policy test is whether they have demonstrated that there is an absence of adequate support for the facility. Again, I point to my audience here and of course the written representations. It is viable or could be made viable, not just whether the current owners are running it viably, because pubs can and are deliberately run down as a precursor to change of use. Paras 6.62 and 6.63 seem to completely miss this. It's precisely relevant whether a future alternative proposal is viable because we are consenting changes to community facility that later proved to be unviable, and then through the back door we have caused an unjustified loss of this facility. This is a managed decline where a facility is reduced in scale to the point where there is no hope of rescue, and then further application change into another residential unit will potentially follow. There lieth my concerns is mainly viability based. I'll refer to 6.52. Economic and social changes. Conversely, this could be read that there is now little or no competition and therefore viability improved. 6.53, 6.54. Where is the evidence to support this statement? Whereas Stansted Parish Council provided an independent, professional RICS report, which it evidences to the contrary of 6.53 and 6.54. 6.55, turning to the first of viability once again. As previously mentioned, this statement relies solely on Companies House accounts, which haven't been submitted onto the website for transparency and evidence interrogation. Company accounts, as I've said earlier, are not a judgment of viability. They are purely a snapshot in that year of whether profit or loss has been made or not. Stansted Parish Council, as I say again, have provided a detailed, professional, independent report to support viability. 6.58. The mixed model. I'm going to bring this up because it's already a mixed model and it's been referred to on a number of occasions now. But the mixed model does already exist. But for some reason, this has not been utilised. So this cannot be relied on either on the basis of past performance. Also, this contradicts 6.62, presuming future viability. 6.63, planning policy test. I wholly disagree, as per independent RICS report, and of course, no professional evidence from the applicant viability. So that statement, I'm going to have to disagree with. So finally, the future viability. Questionable when applicant's planning statement goes to actually state opening hours, which are vastly reduced from what your normal pub opening hours would be. That in itself will help, well, damage viability of any future proposed pub in the smaller end of the building. I'll go to 2. Viability is obviously my main concern, but 2 is support and demand, because it goes along with CP26 to demonstrate that there is no support or any demand. It is clear by the attendance this evening and the large number of local written representations, plus, and this is plus the big one, and that's the £500,000 funds that have been raised. I would think that would demonstrate that there certainly is a demand and there certainly is support. And reference to the pop-up pub, again, this evidence is support, but this is a short-term measure and cannot be compared to a commercial enterprise, as is stated in 6.42. The pop-up pub is to focus support from the community and clearly demonstrates that there is support. To refer to a once-a-month pop-up pub as evidence of a public house and is viable without food provision is misleading. 6.41. The mere size of the resulting area for the pub would not meet the criteria of CP26. 6.43. With the size of the pub proposed being so small, the quiz night, events, etc. referred to could only be accommodated using outside areas. In other words, let's pray for the rain to stop. The community events could continue in that small pub. 6.46. This predicts no loss without independent professional evidence. It is mere hearsay that a minuscule resulting pub would be viable and continue to serve the community as per CP26. (6.51) So we're going back to CP26, A, B, C. Evidence by this evening at C. So I will strike out C in the fact that we can demonstrate that there is support, there is a need, and indeed there's been £500,000 raised by the local community to try and obviously purchase the pub, and that's through the asset of community value. That hasn't really been mentioned much tonight, to be fair. But it is an important matter, the fact that it has been registered in that way, and it does give the option for the community to at least bid for that asset of value. But the problem we have here is we have owners that, for whatever reason, don't seem keen to get into dialogue with the community. But anyway, in any event, it does evidence that there is adequate support and there is a need and demand for this pub. 6.53, again, no evidence where Stansted, I refer to again, have produced a RICS report. I'm now going to just return to the Trosley appeal. I'll just read a couple, I won't take too long. I'm mindful it's 10:30 tonight, but it is quite relevant to this application. I'll give you a bit of background to this appeal. This was down at Trosley, and it was the Plough pub. The appeal is fairly similar to what we've got before us now because it does relate heavily to CP26, and that's the main judgment of the appeal that was dismissed. The main reasons in the appeal, the 25th of July 2019, for the Plough pub at Trosley. The main appeal reason was the effect of the proposal on the provision of local community facilities. And I'll just quickly read those reasons. Community facilities. The Tonbridge and Malling Borough Council's core strategy policy CP26 states that proposals for loss of premises currently or last used for the provision of the community services or recreation, leisure or cultural facilities will only be permitted if, amongst other matters, an alternative facility or equivalent or better quality and scale to meet the identified need is available, or it has been proved that for the foreseeable future there is likely to be an absence of need or adequate support for the facility. Para 92 of the NPPF states that planning decisions should guard against the unnecessary loss of valued facilities and services. I'll skip all the detail, bearing in mind the time we're at the moment. I'll go straight to the sort of final conclusion on the paragraph. Accordingly, on the evidence available to me, I conclude that the proposal would result in unacceptable harm to the local community, as it has not been adequately demonstrated that the loss of this valued community facility the loss of this adequate value community would be necessary. Whilst an alternative facility exists nearby, it has not been successfully demonstrated that this would meet the needs of the community, nor has it been proved that there would not be adequate support for the public house for the foreseeable future. The proposal, therefore, is in contrary to the CS policy CP26 and would not meet the aims of paragraph 92 of the NPPF. That's sort of resounding similarities of what I see with this application. And that was the appeal for the Trosley Power Pub. And just to give you a bit of context there, that's now a community-led pub, a community thriving-led pub on a very limited area. So it just demonstrates what the community can do. And that's just down the road from us. Therefore, based on the facts of viability documents or lack of, and I just have to re-emphasize that Companies House accounts cannot be a justified viability document for this application and cannot be relied upon. The lack of clarity of said documents, we are unable to come to an opinion to support the application of non-viability under CP26 policy. In fact, to the contrary, evidence supplied by Stansted PC, both independent and professional, RICS report supports the pub as being viable. Therefore, viability cannot be used as to support this application under CP26. Thank you.
Thank you. I note that Councillor Coffin, who's the other ward member, is indicating he'd like to speak. Would you like to come in now, Councillor Coffin?
Yes, please. Thank you. I hope I'm not too loud or too quiet.
You're good.
Okay, good. Robin obviously has outlined all of the, if you like, the technical reasons, the CP26 reasons that we should be refusing this application. But if one looks at it perhaps at a slightly different view, I think this application is quite cynical and is actually set up to fail, in as far as we've got this wet-led small micropub. Where micropubs succeed is normally in the town centres. I think Greg managed to bring out the details there quite reasonably. So I believe that this is set up to failure with the noise, the inability to run a micropub in a village situation. And actually, you know, I think this was a long-term plan. When the current owners took over and we went down there for a meal, we want to support the pub, as one does, we were offered appalling food, we were offered appalling service, and as Brian has alluded to, the general demeanour and the general attitude towards customers, the pub, the well-being, the support was just not there. So I do think that this was set up 2 to 3 years ago. CP26 is vitally important in this one. And the fact that the locals have actually raised $500,000, but just to make that clear, they have offered, as Tom Sheldon said, to match any market valuation. So if it's more than $500,000, then that is there to show support. So I think it's quite resounding that there is enough support to make this into a really good, viable community-led pub, and that flies in the face, absolutely flies in the face of CP26. As I say, that's as much as I should say at the moment, because I'm under some obligation to return to my rehab, and Robin has very adequately expressed the technical side of reasons for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Borton.
So back in 2022, we had a local plan consultation, and I remember doing a meeting in Stansted Village Hall, and the best thing about all the public meetings to do plan consultations, going to the pubs afterwards. I remember going in the Black Horse afterwards, and it was really nice. It was, so this is autumn 22, this was, and it was a proper community feel, a proper community pub, and we had a good chat there about planning. Little did we know what would happen in terms of what's on the agenda tonight. I also remember, because my wife used to be a teacher at Grange Park School, and specifically at what the Stansted site, the primary provision there when it first opened, and the importance that the community had placed on getting the school, after the original Stansted school had closed, operational as a school again, as part of of Grange Park. And the community in Stansted is very special. I know everyone says that about every community, and I would say the same about West Peckham and how the Swan is thriving. And I declare an interest, I suppose, because I'm part owner of the Swan, and obviously Sarah and I are the councillors for the area, and it is a great pub, to whoever said that earlier too. I think perhaps the government are missing a trick here, in that when they call about objectively assessed housing need, they should have an objectively assessed pub need too. Not just because it will go down really well with me, but because actually there's something to be said, and we hear lots and lots of national politicians talking about pubs to the centres of the community and all of that, but actually they're in real danger, and communities, whether it's in West Peckham or in Trosley, have demonstrated that actually they can come in, buy, purchase a pub and run it viably and successfully. And we have got clear evidence in what we've heard tonight, the written representations that have been submitted, that the Stansted community will do that. They've raised £500,000. They have said they will match any market offer, and I've got no doubt that will be the case. The money seems to come in, funnily enough. It's probably, although the sums involved are very big, would you like to be part of a pub purchase? That was an easier sell to my wife to spend some money when it was the Swan in West Peckham than it was, would you like a new car? I cannot for the life of me understand what the owner of the pub is playing at. Martin said it really well, as did Robin. And I just don't get the strategy here at all. If you own a pub and the pub's not viable in your view, then you've got two options. You either sell it or you change the management. Now, I think in a village like Stansted, and given the loss of the Anchor and Hope, the loss of the Green Man, obviously, in Hodsall Street, obviously had the fire a few years ago. You've lost the Vigo Inn, so you lost pubs in the area. You sort of you've got an obligation to the community, and I just don't get the hostility. We heard that a little bit in what the applicant was saying too. I don't understand why the agent, would come and be hostile towards the efforts of the parish council and the people in the community. I just don't understand. I don't understand how it's got to this point at all. I think it's just bad. I had a bit of a pop at the agent in the last application too, and I'm going to have a pop at this one. Again, if the planning system's going to work, then agents really need to start working with people and not against communities. Look at what's happening tonight. It's 10:30. It's a small village, Stansted, and I dread to calculate the percentage of people who are here or watching tonight in this room. But obviously it's a planning application. We've got to determine this on planning merits, and we've got a policy, CP26 little c, that states that the applicant must prove to the satisfaction of the council that for foreseeable future there is likely to be an absence of need or adequate support for the facility. Based on everything I've heard tonight, I cannot agree that that has been met. I think Robin has gone into excellent detail articulating that's why, and I'll be supporting refusal of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Is anybody else would like to? Councillor Taylor.
Thank you very much, Chairman. The pub and the church are two pillars of community life in a rural village. I want to thank the local members and the leader for going over the planning stuff, and I won't repeat it. I've been a member of a planning committee for longer than a decade. I've heard hundreds of public presentations and action groups speaking in this chamber. And I have to say the presentation by the Black Horse Project and the Parish Council are the most professional and well evidenced I've ever heard. Thank you very much. I am convinced. Thank you.
Councillor Crisp.
Yeah, me too. I mean, also I've got shares in the Swan as well. It's quintessentially English, and it's my son's one of his favourite places in the whole world, and so it's so valuable that was saved. And it sounds like I haven't been to the Black Horse. I mean, it sounds great, and you know, it's been heartbreaking seeing so many pubs go under. I live in Hadlow, and 5 out of 6 have gone there, and with a population of 3,500. So it is tragic. Our heritage is being lost before our very eyes, and so yeah, I will be.
Okay, Councillor.
Thank you, Chairman, for letting me speak. Yeah, I must admit, I must confess that I'm a pub goer myself, and I think the atmosphere of a local pub is just fantastic. In my ward, we have 4 villages, and one of those villages, conurbations, hasn't got a pub, and I think the whole thing is I really would love to see a pub in that part of my ward. I think it is such a good thing, and I think this does look like a slippery slope. So I was very, very impressed with what was said by the presentation from the residents. So thank you.
So, Councillor Betts, do you wish to make a proposal?
Yes, I will. I think I've been referring to CP26 all the way through this. And sorry if I was a little bit over technical here, but I was sieving through this report piece by piece, and all my notes refer to each paragraph in that fashion. So apologies for the technical element of my bit here. I'm just pleased that other members, other councillor colleagues have given a more heartfelt view of our pub. I do have to have a conflict of interest here. It is our pub, community pub, and I'm very pleased for that support. So, in terms of trying to articulate this refusal in a way that might be better than the last one, I'm gonna tie it on to CP26. I think would be the best, because as I've read through and listened, it seems that all 3, A, B, and C, have fallen foul. So the reduction in floor area, I think, is pretty obvious. It's going to affect the viability of what remains in that public house and as a community facility, and also the viability. The lack of viability reports that have come forward. There is no test there of viability in my eyes, and it hasn't been adequately evidenced. And then, of course, we have C. I think C speaks for itself, really. There clearly is adequate support. There's not an absence of need. I refer to my audience once again, and I refer to the not insignificant amount of £500,000 that has been raised. I think that sort of overcomes C straight away, really. So on that basis, I think CP26 works quite well for a refusal. I'm going to throw into the mix. There's a bit of a off-piste one here. I'm going to read it out because I had to write this down to try and get my head around this. And that's CP1 and CP24. I'll put it in there, but you can always advise me if it might be simpler to take it out. But the proposed development potentially would harm the character and appearance of the Stansted Conservation Area through the erosion of the communal function of this building and loss of a key public landmark. And it would also harm the significance of the non-designated heritage asset through subdivision. And with that, of course, it's going to have a weakening of the communal value of this historic public house. Insufficient evidence, in my view, as I keep saying, has been provided to demonstrate that the harm necessary to secure the asset's optimum viable use, that less harmful alternatives have been adequately explored, or that the wider public benefits would be delivered would outweigh the harm. You know, I just can't see any of that that's been evidenced here. So, in my view, I think that probably would give weight to the conservation of heritage assets, and the proposal, therefore, is obviously contrary to policy CP1 and CP24, along with CP26 ABC. I hope that helps. So it's a bit of a long one, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay. Ms. Bailey would like to come back.
Can we, we're just constructing the ground on the first ground. Given the fact that the conservation officer has set out the comments in the officer's report that raises no objection, doesn't consider there to be any harm on that basis, again, we're in the same scenario as previously. My advice to the committee is have a strong ground on CP26 on the first ground. My advice is not to add in, because you'll be going against the conservation officer's advice. Appreciate you've got a group of people here that have said in their view they do, but again, you know, your consultees internally have advised you that there is no harm in terms of the statutory test to the conservation area, and in terms of the building itself, they're minor alterations to allow the change of use. My advice would not to be included that second ground and those second elements, but you have a ground that the officer, I think, is almost ready to potentially read out. Give a couple of minutes, and you can come up with a ground that captures those other areas. That would be my advice at this stage.
Councillor Taylor.
Just wanted to indicate I'm happy to support Councillor Betts's.
So that is seconded by Councillor Taylor. So do you want to?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I did say the second one was a bit of an off-piste gamble. So I'm quite happy to take that one out if it makes it a safer refusal, just to rely on CP26 ABC. That's fine.
So do we need to read out the give you a minute? Okay. So can we take a breather for 5 minutes? Okay. While our officer is typing away, can I ask from our audience, who is here for the next item? Nobody. Okay. Are they still in? Oh, they're still in the other room. Oh my goodness. Okay. I thought they. All right. Okay. All right.
That's why, Chairman, I was evidencing the support.
Okay, we could settle down again. The officer is ready. So this is going to be the wording that will go for Councillor Betts's proposal to refuse the application.
Thank you, Chair. The proposed development would result in the loss of part of the premises last used for the provision of community services, and it has not been demonstrated to the satisfaction of the council that the remaining facility is of an adequate scale to meet the identified need or of a size that is adequate to support the community facility contrary to core strategy policy CP26.
Okay, I think we can go to a vote. Are we happy? There with you. Okay. A little bit of addition to that wording. Councillor Betts.
Yeah, I just think probably need to beef up the adequate support in C and the absence of need, bearing in mind the audience that we've got here tonight. I didn't feel that came out strongly enough in that wording. Yeah, okay, thank you. Just so I'm just making sure that's clear. Yeah, that'd be better.
We'll add in identified significant need, reflect the audience now, and also to add in paragraph 98, the MPPF, which should takes, I'll just read it, to provide the social, recreation and cultural facilities and services the community needs. Planning policies and decisions should guard against the unnecessary loss of valued facilities and services, particularly where this will reduce the community's ability to meet its day-to-day needs. And that's 98C. Include that in the ground as well. And I will add that I think the ground is a supportable ground and a defendable ground.
That may not mean anything to you, but that means a lot to us. Okay, so we are going to be voting for a proposal of refusal on the grounds of the wording that has just been read out to you. So if you agree, it is for a refusal. I'd like to take the vote.
Thank you, Councillor Palmer.
Agree.
Councillor Banks.
Agree.
Councillor Betts.
For.
Councillor Borton.
For.
Councillor Crisp.
Agree.
Councillor Hudson.
Agree.
Councillor Roud.
Agree.
Councillor Tanner.
For.
Councillor Tatton.
For.
Councillor Taylor.
Agreed.
It's unanimous.
That result was unanimous for a refusal of the application. Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. You can go home to bed. However, we are still going to be here. If I could ask you to leave fairly rapidly so we can get on to the next application, please. Thank you. So you'll be taking the seats over there? Yeah. Move along the line, please. Alan, we're still here. Can you keep streaming, please? Okay, can you tell us when you can see and hear us, Alan? You can, jolly good. It should come back. Oh, look, here we go. That one's okay. Yeah, I mean, what can you see? Okay, because all we can see at the moment are just blank screens. So we're working on it. I'm very sorry about this. Alan, can you see the? Can you see the screen that's actually got something on? Okay, we're all working off the one screen then. Okay, as long as you can see it. Right. Okay. Yeah. Guys, do you want to do a trundle that direction? Because these aren't working and that one is. So go for it. Go for it. Go for it. Okay, right, hang on, let me introduce. Right, okay, we are going to our next application. Hang on. Okay, might just plunge us into darkness. Yeah, we're back. Right, okay. Our next application is Alan's Hectare in Cemetery Lane. Susan, you're still.
Thank you, Chair. This application seeks to change the use of the land to travellers and caravan site consisting of 6 additional residential caravan plots. The slide in front of you is the Red Edge site plan, and the 2 areas in blue next to them are the existing pitches. Next slide shows the layout of the application. And then I've got a more detailed one to show the 6 pitches with the static caravans, the day rooms, the touring caravans, and the parking spaces of how each pot is laid out. Down. The next slide shows the day rooms. Then I've just got a few site photographs. This site is the existing access. Down the bottom there, it comes in from Cemetery Lane. It serves off to the left another existing traveller site, and then moves up towards the 2 existing pitches. This slide shows the existing dividing fence, which would be removed to make way for the access road. And obviously, the fence would then be reinstated either side. A couple of other slides. This is standing, looking at the site from the south, looking at from the existing pitches, sorry. And again, this is looking from the south of the site, again with one of the other pictures. Sorry, it's getting late. Thank you, Chair.
Right. We have a speaker from Hadlow Parish, Mr. Baldock, if you'd like to come and speak.
Oh, good evening, committee, Chairman. I just been having a good look at the report, which wasn't particularly accessible online, I have to say earlier. But I think a lot of the report from the officers, and I'm not getting at the officers, there is a lot of specious talk about green belts, grey belts, black belts, yellow belts. In many respects, the green belt aspect is not the central aspect of the parish council's objection to this. The inspector in 2023 quite succinctly put that the green belt was to be made an exception for the existing site, and the parish council accept that. There's no point in trying to fight an old battle. But what the parish is concerned about is the scheduling conditions which the inspector put on the last appeal on this site in 2023 in his decision. And it states quite clearly that no more than 2 caravans as defined on the Caravan Sites and Control Act shall be stationed on any pitch at any one time, of which there will be no more than one, only one shall be a static caravan, and no further caravans shall be placed at any time anywhere within the site. And that's quite a defined and definite decision, I think. Also, no commercial activities shall take place, and to my knowledge there aren't any particularly commercial activities going on there. The site is well tolerated in the village, I have to say. It's a very tidy site, it's well managed and well looked after, and consequently has not been an issue whatsoever. But to increase it by almost twice its present size it is felt going to be a bit more of a problem. Not because of who's there, it's just it's on a very narrow road. It's not the best site in terms of access onto the A26, although that would be disputed, I'm quite sure. And also we're not entirely sure about the retention of fences, because the inspector was quite clear that no means of enclosure, fences, walls, gates, etc. are to be erected on the site. So we're a little bit confused as to where that lies within the, as has just been said by the officer, you know, put a fence back. According to that, there shouldn't be any fences there in the first place. But the parish is not unhappy, and could I please ask you not to support the officer's recommendation? Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is the agent, Dr. Angus Murdoch.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity to address you today in support of my client's application for 6-pitch traveller site for their own family. When the Secretary of State allowed the appeal for 2 pitches in 2023, he found as follows. He said the other considerations before me, unmet need, no 5-year supply and failure of policy, are of such magnitude and weight that they combine to form very special circumstances that clearly outweighs harm to the Greenbelt by reason of inappropriateness and any other harm. Since then, in December 2024, the National Planning Policy Framework has changed, such that this application site is no longer inappropriate development in the Greenbelt. Therefore, very special circumstances don't have to be demonstrated, and the tilted balance applies, which justifies approving the application. In addition, the proposal complies in full with Local Plan Policy CP20. Paragraph 16 of Planning Policy for Traveller Sites says that traveller sites are inappropriate development in the green belt, excuse me, unless the exceptions set out in Chapter 13 of the National Planning Policy Framework apply. This proposal is not inappropriate, firstly, because it does comply with the relevant exception in the National Planning Policy Framework, paragraph 155. Secondly, the application site is grey belt for the same purposes as the National Planning Policy Framework definition. Allowing this very modest application would not, indeed it could not, fundamentally undermine the purposes taken together of the remaining green belt across the plan area, such that the further conditions for the development being not inappropriate set out in paragraph 155 are met. Since it's common ground, there's no 5-year supply of traveller sites. Paragraph 28 of Planning Policy for Traveller Sites provides a presumption in favour of granting this permission on this site. Even if none of the foregoing was agreed, the application should still be approved because the applicant can demonstrate very special circumstances due to unmet need, the absence of a 5-year supply, failure of policy, and the lack of suitable alternative sites. The applicants live on the adjacent site and strong local connections include having sent their own children to school here. Proposal seeks to meet their family's own accommodation needs. They've acted impeccably and despite the desperate need for site, haven't occupied the site in breach of planning control, or work constructively with officers to resolve every single technical issue raised, such that now officers recommend permanent planning permission be granted. In terms of the conditions the previous inspector imposed, clearly they related to an application for 2 pitches, so the inspector imposed conditions relating to that application. This application imposes 6 and the conditions reflect that. So why the Secretary of State imposed those conditions in the past don't apply now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I did ask if you could discuss the inspector's
appeal decision.
Yeah, no, sorry.
Okay, it's I'm just really going to reiterate what the agents just said, and that the appeal decision was issued prior to the new MPPF in 2024, and now there is now the concept of grey belt. Therefore, the inspector, had it gone before him now, would be considering grey belt like we are today. So whilst I appreciate under that policy, when that appeal was determined, the inspector did put that condition on. We've obviously got a different set of policies before us at the moment to determine this application. As I've said out in the committee report, I'm of the opinion that the application is grey belt and therefore appropriate development.
Thank you. Now, the councillor that called this in is Councillor Locke, who unfortunately is not with us at present. Would anybody like to speak to the application? Councillor Quinn is pointing. Board member, yes.
Hey. Well, unfortunately, James hasn't actually contacted me about this at all. So I don't really know too much about it, on the fact that there are sites required. And in terms of the grey belt, as I sort of mentioned earlier, it's very vague and subjective. So I'm actually really not quite sure. It seems that it is a big increase from 2 to another 6, but if all the conditions apply, as James mentioned, I'm not quite sure how you can go against the rules of that are laid down now. It just seems a big increase to me. So yeah, I'm a little bit confused about it at the moment, and without James here to actually tell me what his thoughts are, I can't be any more help than that at the moment.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you very much. I've promised not to descend into an old trucker's tale, but Cemetery Lane is particularly important to me because for about 4 years I trundled up and down there in my truck about 4 times a day, going to the Victoria Farm water bottling plant. And I always used to try and time my lunch on the way back in the lay-by outside the cemetery, which is just off to the right of that map. So I can attest to the beauty and tranquility of the green belt at this location and the openness of the green belt. I can also attest to the bloody appalling exit from Cemetery Lane onto the main A26. Thank you.
Anybody else like to contribute? No? In that respect then, I will follow the officer's recommendation and propose that we grant this application. Sorry, sorry.
It felt like you were about to go to a vote, but I just wanted to ask a question about need. Usually with Gypsy and Traveller applications, we have a debate about whether the applicants are actually Gypsy or Traveller status. Now, obviously, by virtue of the fact this isn't a new site, this is an extension of a approved site. I hear what it says in the report, and I think that's quite clear. But in terms of the overall position with regard to need, obviously we don't have a supply at the moment. We had an application here a few cycles ago in Leybourne, actually, in which that was passed essentially on the basis of the need. The additional 6 residential caravans, which would make this a substantial development, I have to say, just from officers' perspective, because I can't find it in the report, and that might be because it's late, where does that get us in terms of our need?
I think you can answer that, Susan.
Yes, it is in the report of paragraph 6.5. We have a need for 33 additional Gypsy pitches across Tunbridge and Malling. Of this need, 12 pitches should be provided in the first 5 years of the plan and 21 over the long term. Then I've noted that in regard to the immediate need, the 4 pitches have recently been approved, which we approved under for the paddocks, leaving the remaining immediate need of 8 pitches. So that would also, so this would mean there would be 2 need left. That makes sense.
Yeah. So you want to come back?
No, well, I think that's important because I completely get the concerns of the parish council. I completely get the concerns about temperature. I'm not trying to underestimate them, and I'm not saying I'm happy. As Owen said, I think part of the problem we've got here, as was the problem with the paddocks, was the appeal decision in 2023, because that kind of set the principle of development. I'd be quite uncomfortable if this got any bigger, particularly to the east towards the cemetery. That's a completely different question. But looking at the boundary of this, you could argue it's being contained within a plot. But the reason I asked the question is actually the additional 6 here leave us with a shortfall of 2, as Sue said, but also it's 12 over the first 5 years of the plan. I mean, we can actually deal with a significant amount of our need right now. And is it better to have our need on a site in which the occupiers are currently, from what I've heard tonight, good neighbours? Actually, I mean, it's very tempting, and it might actually tip the balance in favour of this. But the reason I'm slightly hesitant is because I don't think it's ideal, but we'll see worse sites come forward potentially. I'm a bit on the fence, as you can tell. A bit unlike me. So.
Okay, Councillor Betts.
Thank you, Chair. No, I was just listening to observations of the site and indeed the current pitches that are there and how it's all operating. It's actually operating really well. It's a tidy site. What's really nice about this application is that it's come forward before anything's actually happened. And that's quite comforting, really. So on that basis, I didn't quite hear all the observations by Owen, but were there potentially a few conditions that we might want to add into this? I didn't hear exactly what, I don't know if officers did, but about fencing or whatever it was. But I'm just thinking if we're minded to approve, then maybe we can look at the conditions to make sure they're set out strongly enough, just to bolster up what we may or may not approve. That's all, taking into account some observations from parish council. But I didn't quite hear exactly what they were, but it was something in relation to fencing or whatever. I'm not sure.
Okay, well, there are 13 conditions on the application. There's obviously quite a few standard. There's a standard one, condition 5, that it must be occupied by Gypsy travellers. There's a standard one with regard to the caravans themselves. In regard to fencing, I think there's a landscaping condition. Yeah, and condition Yeah, so condition 9 is landscaping, and condition 7 we've taken away permitted development rights for gates, walls and fences.
Bets.
On that basis, then, with the condition, I'm looking at them now, condition 9, then scheme of landscaping. So I guess that'll be under delegated officer delegation. Yeah. Well, if you can tidy that up in relation to what may or may not have been brought up by Owen, I'm not sure, but we can maybe clarify that, and that could be tied up within that condition. That might help to some degree.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you for letting me come back, Jim. Can you clarify whether this will be development in Greenbelt and the Greenbelt will remain? Or does it have to be, do we have to use the grey belt option?
It is grey belt, but the green belt isn't affected. Had this debate before. You can only change the green belt status via the local plan, but the assessment carried out on this one is that it's grey belt because we've got that demonstrable need. It then becomes appropriate development.
Okay, so can we, would it be possible to have a discussion about the condition 9? Is that a viable thing for the
Just to clarify, so Councillor Betts, on that basis of condition 9, what would you have actually wanted? Do you want that in consultation with the chairman in terms of when that comes forward? Do you want condition 9 to come back to this committee on reserve matters? Sorry, not reserve matters, not an outline, sorry, of details, because obviously that will have to be submitted. I'm not quite so sure what you were looking to.
I would say it's just a very simple in consultation to oversee that condition and to reflect the concerns raised by parish council. That's all. So keep it light-hearted.
Okay, what we can do is we can just, when that condition submission comes in, we can consult with the chairman just to get agreement in terms of when that gets signed off, effectively details. Okay, we can add that in. We can add that in the minutes. Okay, yeah.
So, subject to consultation with parish and ward members on condition 9? Not parish. Okay, not parish. So, ward members and the chair, and okay, and me. Subject to that consultation on condition 9, can I make? Okay, we're going to go again.
Zane you there. So just to be clear, it's consultation with the chair of the committee and the ward members. It can it be consultation with the parish council too, given the parish council effectively raised this in their statements by virtue of the fact, I'm assuming this would be a discharge conditions application. If so, then would that naturally trigger the consultation with the parish anyway? Do we need to include that in the recommendation?
The parish council would be able to have the ability to comment, but we wouldn't have in consultation with. If the ward members wanted to consult, let them know. But actually, it's a decision-making process, so we would have to keep it sort of, I call it in the council remit.
Yeah.
Okay, we're all right now. Okay, so let's go again. So proposal is to accept with the consultation of the ward members and myself on condition 9. Could I have a seconder for that? Councillor Betts? Yeah.
What I would suggest, just to make sure that's covered, I would put that as an informative for when it comes in, and that notifies the applicant. Otherwise, there's nothing on the decision notice to notify anyone. So if I could just have that delegated to the Director of new title, Regulatory Services, Planning, Housing and Regulatory Services. No, that's Director, not me, that's Eleanor. And so just to put that into the decision on the informative, and that means it keeps it clear as in the process we have to go through. Okay.
Can you add that in, Victoria? That's fine. You propose it, I'll second it. Okay, can we go to a vote? So an agreement is to accept the officer's report and grant the application. Agree.
Councillor Banks,
Agree.
Councillor Betts,
For.
Councillor Broughton,
For.
the Crisp,
For.
Hudson,
For.
Councillor Roud,
For.
Councillor Tanner,
For.
Tutton,
For.
Councillor Taylor.
Agreed.
That was a unanimous agreement to accept the officer's report and grant the application. Thank you. Have you? So, we still have one application to look at. We're going to do it today, okay? Today, we're going to get it through today. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Okay, last one up. Martin, are you still with us, or are you gone to sleep by now?
Still with you, but if I'm honest, I'm lying in a hospital bed now.
Oh, I'm not saying we want to be there, but bed sounds a good place to be. So, okay. Okay, this is something that's come back for a costs report. Alan's oath that was heard in the 14th of January meeting. How do we proceed? Do you need to present the? No. Right. Anybody who wishes to discuss the report, we need to go into part 2. That needs to be proposed and seconded. If you wish to discuss the part 2. Yeah. So you want to, who proposed by Councillor Hudson, seconded by Councillor Borton. We are now going into part 2, which means afraid, sir, you're going to have to leave the room so we can discuss in private. Yeah. Yeah, we'll come and get you.